Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Michele Davis. Michele Davis was born on December 15, 1966. She lived in Des Moines. In 2008, Michele, 41-year-old, lived in Des Moines and had 3 children. Those who knew Michele described her as friendly, adventurous, and passionate about motorcycles. As a secretary at a trucking company, she earned respect and authority at work. Her divorce was almost finalized, marking a big change in her life. Then, Michele had moved into her own apartment and obtained a restraining order against her husband, Randy Davis. The months leading up to their divorce were strained for the family. On Thursday, September 11, 2008, Michele was working at her job. Her colleagues noticed that after divorce to her husband, she seemed unusually carefree, as if a long-standing burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She was in high spirits and left the office around 4:30 p.m. after completing her tasks. Soon after, the 911 dispatch center receiving calls from eyewitnesses, reporting a car accident on Interstate 235. The Mercury Sable car was flipped over, with an unconscious woman, still wearing a seatbelt, in the driver's seat. Unfortunately, paramedics were unable to save her, and the woman was identified as Michele Davis. Initially, the police believed that Michele had lost control of the vehicle, resulting in the accident. However, by the next day, this theory was ruled out. Forensic examination revealed that Michele's death was caused by a gunshot wound to the head, not by injuries sustained during the rollover accident. The extracted bullet was sent for further examination in the hopes of identifying the perpetrator. The investigators assigned to this case were faced with an unusual and challenging situation. As they awaited the results of the ballistic examination, local authorities took precautions to ensure public safety. There was concern that Michele might have been a random victim, raises the possibility that the perpetrator may target others. Plus, a large number of cars travel on this interstate, putting numerous drivers at risk of being targeted by the shooter. Given the urgency of the situation, the police increased their patrols in the city. Once it was confirmed that Michele's death was not an accident, detectives went to the crime scene to collect evidence. Unfortunately, they didn't find any leads, including the cartridge case or other evidence. The initial assumption that Michele's death was a car accident led to traffic services clearing the site, which likely destroyed any potential evidence. However, detectives didn't give up. They decided to review traffic camera recordings, which have helped solve numerous cases in the past. By analyzing the available footage, the investigators looked for the camera closest to the crime scene. After reviewing the footage for half an hour, found the relevant clip. The video showed Michele's car overturning, but the quality was poor due to choppy and intermittent images, making it difficult to determine what happened. Despite managing to obtain a few relevant images, but the investigators were unable to find conclusive evidence of the incident leading to the rollover. The investigators faced a great difficulty, as they were sure that they held an important clue that would help solve the case, but in the end it turned out to be a false clue. The police were left with no choice but to continue scrutinizing the remaining camera footage and search for eyewitnesses. While a team of investigators carefully examined footage from traffic cameras, the lead investigator on Michele Davis's case paid a visit to her family to share some news. It had been initially assumed that Michele's death was an accident, however, but in reality that is not the case. The revelation that Michele was, in fact, a victim of a crime left her family stunned. This tragic news was particularly devastating for Michele's father, Lee Costner. His wife, Michele's mother Patty, had passed away before their daughter. Lee Costner had already experienced the loss of a child once before. His first daughter, Cheryl Sue Costner, died in 1965 at just 1 year old. Now, 43 years later, he had to face the unbearable pain of losing another child. Having to outlive one's children is arguably the most unimaginable hardship for a parent. Michelle's family informed investigators that her life had undergone significant changes recently. They suspected that the one person who could potentially harm Michele was her husband, Randy Davis, due to their pending divorce and a restraining order filed against him. While investigating Michelle's background, another detective spoke with her colleagues at work and discovered that she had developed a close relationship with a coworker named Matt Jorgensen. According to Michelle's friend, the feelings between them were mutual. However, since Michele was in the process of divorcing Randy, they decided to keep their relationship private, known only to a few colleagues and close friends. As a result, the police now had two potential suspects, Randy Davis and Matt Jorgensen. When investigators attempted to contact Randy, they were unsuccessful, as all calls went straight to voicemail. In contrast, they were able to speak with Matt, who openly discussed his relationship with Michele and provided an account of his activities on the day of her death. Matt stated that they never had arguments or fights. He was visibly shaken by Michelle's death and cooperated fully with the investigators. After verifying his alibi, the police eliminated him as a suspect. The ballistic examination results revealed that the crime was committed with a .22 caliber rifle at close range. Given that the incident occurred on the interstate, police believe the shooter was most likely driving another vehicle, next to Michelle's, at the same time. A new lead emerged when the police received a call from Michelle's insurance company, stating that her brother Todd was filing a claim for the life insurance payout. This raised suspicions, as insurance-related murders are not uncommon. The detective decided to pay Todd a visit to ask some questions. During the interrogation, Todd realized he was being treated as a suspect, so he explained his whereabouts on the day of Michelle's death. Todd revealed that their family was struggling financially and couldn't afford a proper funeral for Michele, prompting him to file the insurance claim to cover the expenses. Further investigation into Todd's alibi confirmed that he was indeed in a different part of the city at the time of Michelle's death, ruling him out as the shooter. Todd provided the police with information that pointed to another suspect, Michelle's stepson, Josh. At the time of the incident, Josh was an adult who had recently returned from serving in the Marines. As someone familiar with handling weapons, Josh became a person of interest in the investigation. The police began to explore motives that could have driven Josh to commit this crime. In another development, a witness came forward with a crucial tip. A woman who was driving on Interstate 235 around the same time as Michelle's accident reported seeing a red pickup truck. Likely a Ford F-150, with a driver behaving erratically. The driver, described as an white man wearing a baseball cap, was swerving from lane to lane. It feels like he's chasing someone. Although the description was limited, the investigators deemed this new information significant and proceeded to investigate further. The investigation into Michelle's death led detectives to review footage from traffic cameras, focusing on the presence of a red pickup truck. A woman had tipped off the police about a suspicious red truck, and indeed, the footage showed this vehicle following Michele from her workplace. Although the footage quality was poor, preventing identification of the driver and license plates, further review of recordings from other cameras confirmed the truck was tailing Michele along her route. This strongly suggested that the killer was likely targeting Michele specifically. Detectives soon discovered that Michelle's husband, Randy Davis, was the owner of a red pickup truck. They immediately visited his residence but found him not at home. However, his son Josh, a Marine with professional knowledge of firearms, was at home. Josh stated Randy had spent the day of Michelle's death shopping with his sister, returned home, and spent the evening watching TV. He also revealed that Michelle's divorce from Randy had been complex, particularly due to her demand for half the value of their house. Additionally, Josh mentioned that his father had come home around 5:30 p.m. that evening. Josh's account of incident did not seem believable, and the conversation with Josh revealed that he had a possible motive for the crime. When his father and Michele divorce, she will receive a portion of the estate, which makes him unhappy. However, these were just suspicions, and without concrete evidence, there was not enough to warrant an arrest or charges. As Michele's family made funeral arrangements, the police continued searching for leads. They investigated shops and gas stations along the route between Michele's workplace and where she died, to gather additional camera surveillance footage. Near Michele's workplace, a store provided another crucial piece of footage. The surveillance camera inside the store also captured part of the parking lot. On September 11, 2008, the day of Michele's death, a red pickup truck parked at the store's entrance around 4 p.m. The police identified the truck as Randy's vehicle, but since Josh also used it, they needed to determine who was driving it that day. The footage showed the driver exit the truck, enter the store, and then disappear from view temporarily, then reappearing to make a purchase and leave. The poor video quality made it impossible to distinguish whether the driver was Randy or Josh. To clarify the events, here's what happened. Michele left work at 4:30 p.m., but police had looked at the timeline before then. At 4 p.m., a series of incidents occurred near the store where Michele worked. The police reviewed the footage and found a pickup truck repeatedly visiting the store in the 30 minutes that followed. In each of these visits, the driver did not get out of the truck but instead turned around and drove away. The last time the truck was seen near the store was when Michele left work. Despite the efforts of the police to identify the driver, they were unsuccessful. The police then decided to try to contact Randy again. This time, they were successful, and Randy came to the police station. Before interviewing him, the police made it clear that Randy was not under arrest and explained his rights. During the interview, the police asked Randy about his whereabouts on September 11th. Randy mentioned that he and Michele were in the process of getting a divorce after 17 years of marriage. He also said that he worked as a carpenter and went to work that day. When asked what time he got home from work, Randy hesitated, then saying he arrived home at 3:45 p.m. However, this contradicted the surveillance footage and the testimony of Josh. According to Josh, his father got home around 5:30 p.m., which is about 2 hours later than the time Randy provided. Randy further stated that he did not leave his house after 3:45 p.m. and claimed he was alone until Josh arrived, and they cooked dinner together. However, this information also contradicts Josh's statement, who said that he was already home when his father arrived. Randy and Josh's defenses contradict each other, and after questioning Randy, investigators discovered that one of them was lying. To see Randy's reaction, they revealed to him that Michele had actually died from a gunshot wound, not from injuries sustained in a car accident. This information had been kept confidential, known only to Michele's family. However, Randy's reaction was very suspicious. He barely reacted, feigning surprise and looking away. When questioned about his last talk with Michele, Randy requested a lawyer, effectively ending the conversation. Although the investigation lacked crucial evidence, including the murder weapon, thus the police released Randy. For days after Michele's death, her family and friends gathered for her funeral on September 15, 2008. Randy attended the ceremony, tried to appear sad and even burst into tears. Investigators worked hard to quickly find the killer. Unexpected help arrived when Josh, accompanied by his lawyer, walked into the police station and expressed his desire to make a statement. According to Josh, on the day of the incident, he had returned home from his sister's house to find his father, Randy, in the driveway with their car. As Josh entered the house, he saw his father holding a gun and Randy warned him away, saying it would be better if he didn't come in right then. Josh claimed to have immediately understood what his father was planning and tried to stop him, begging Randy not to do something he would later regret. Regardless of Josh's plea, Randy drove away in the car and returned later, parking in the garage. It was then that Randy confessed to Josh that he had shot Michele. As it turned out, Randy had been struggling to cope with Michele's decision to file for divorce and her plans to sue him for part of their property. On September 11, 2008, Randy had waited for Michele to leave work, driving past her workplace several times to avoid missing her. This explained why he appeared on the store's CCTV footage multiple times. Once Michele left work, Randy followed her and eventually found the right moment to act. He rolled down the passenger side window and fired. The police arrested Randy based on Josh's testimony. Before the trial, Randy accepted a plea deal, admitting to deprivation of life Michele's in exchange for a reduced sentence. As a result, 53-year-old Randy Davis was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adrienne Jones. Adrienne Jessica Jones was a bright light in Mansfield in 1995. As a 16-year-old junior at Mansfield High School, she captivated everyone with her beauty, exceptional qualities, and impressive achievements. Adrienne was an outstanding student, consistently excelling in advanced honors courses and demonstrating a strong work ethic. She spent at least 2 hours each night studying to ensure her success, which earned her high grades. Her kindness, intelligence, and infectious spirit made her a role model and a beloved figure among her classmates and teachers. In addition to her academic prowess, Adrienne was a talented athlete. She was a dedicated member of the girls' soccer team, showcasing remarkable skill and dedication on the field. After graduating from Mansfield High School, Adrienne's dream was to become a veterinarian and help animals. After a game injury forced her to temporarily leave her team, Adrienne didn't give up on sports. Instead, she joined the girls' cross-country team, which allowed her to stay active and improve her fitness. She threw herself into the new challenge, working hard to get in shape. Her dedication paid off, and she soon became a key member of the cross-country team. In addition to her academic and athletic pursuits, Adrienne also held down a part-time job, working 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken. Despite her busy schedule, Adrienne enjoyed being the center of attention, particularly from teenage boys in Mansfield. Her friends would even describe her as a bit of a flirt. She took great care in her appearance, spending at least 2 hours each day on her makeup to ensure she looked perfect. Adrienne, like many teenagers, often tested the limits set by her parents. Despite her good nature, her parents were particularly protective of her due to the changing environment in Mansfield, where crime was on the rise. They implemented a strict 9 p.m. curfew on weekends to ensure her safety, requiring her to provide proof of her activities, such as ticket stubs, if she wanted to stay out later. To prevent her from sneaking out, her father also nailed her bedroom window shut. Although Adrienne occasionally disobeyed her parents and left the house at night to meet her friends, on Sunday, December 3, 1995, she was given special permission to stay up late to talk to her boyfriend, Tracy Smith, who was out of town with his parents. During their phone conversation, Adrienne's mother overheard her mention that another call was coming in. When asked about the caller's identity, Adrienne said it was David from her cross-country team, who seemed upset about something. Adrienne's family started their day as usual the next morning, but her mother's concern grew when she heard Adrienne's alarm still going off in her bedroom. When she went to check on her, she discovered that Adrienne was missing, and her bed had not been slept in. Despite trying to stay calm, Adrienne's mother quickly became worried. She initially thought Adrienne might have gone for an early morning run, but this idea was quickly dismissed when she saw Adrienne's running shoes still on the floor. In the past, Adrienne had occasionally sneaked out at night to meet friends, but she had always returned home by morning, making her mother even more worried about her disappearance. Worried about Adrienne, her parents contacted the police. Unbeknownst to them, a shocking discovery was made on a farm several miles away. At around 7 a.m., on Seaton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, a man was on his way to check his mailbox when he noticed that the gate to his property had been knocked down. Curious, he entered his farm and was met with an unsettling scene. Initially, the man thought he was looking at roadkill, but as he got closer, he realized it was a lifeless teenage girl lying on the ground. The man immediately called the police, who arrived to find a disturbing sight. The teenager had been shot execution style, with 2 bullet wounds on her left cheek and forehead. In addition to these gunshot wounds, her head had suffered severe injuries. Moreover, her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises, indicating that she had run through the farm's barbed wire gate. A teenager's violent murder sparked a desperate investigation. The fact that she was found in her nightclothes suggested she had been preparing for bed when her life was brutally cut short. The execution-style killing led police to consider possible links to gang violence or drugs. After discovering the body on the farm, the Grand Prairie Police immediately alerted all nearby agencies, sending out a detailed description of the victim, including her age, height, weight, and other physical characteristics. They hoped that another agency might recognize the description and make a connection to a missing person. It wasn't long before the Mansfield police got in touch with Grand Prairie officers, having made a match. The Mansfield police identified the murdered teenager as Adrienne Jones. With the victim identified, the police had the heartbreaking task of informing Adrienne's parents about her tragic death. When they broke the news to her mother, she was overcome with grief. In the small town of Mansfield, news of Adrienne's murder spread quickly through her high school, leaving her classmates and friends devastated. Classes were interrupted as the news traveled through the halls, and students tearfully consoled one another. The town was on high alert following the discovery of Adrienne's body in a field, with rumors and theories circulating about her death. One theory was that Adrienne was involved in drugs, while others suspected a serial killer might be living among them. Adrienne's parents cooperated with the police, providing information about the last time they saw their daughter. Her mother specifically mentioned a phone call Adrienne had with her boyfriend, Tracy, and another teenager, David, who joined the call while Adrienne was on the phone. After midnight on the night of Adrienne's murder, one of her younger brothers heard a car engine outside their house. When he looked out the window, he saw a pickup truck driving away. The police were interested in identifying a person named David, who had called Adrienne that night. To learn more, they spoke with Adrienne's cross-country coach, who mentioned a team member named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrienne, as there was no indication that they had ever interacted before. David Graham was a 17-year-old high school student with big dreams. After watching his first air show, he decided he wanted to become an Air Force pilot. From then on, he dedicated himself to achieving his goal. David was well liked by his peers at Mansfield High School, where he was popular and charming. Many girls were attracted to him, but he was in a relationship with Diane Zamora, a high school senior who shared his desire to enter the military. Diane stood out from the crowd, actively pursuing her aspirations. After Adrienne's murder, the police interviewed David Graham, who acknowledged knowing her from their cross-country team, but claimed their relationship never went beyond friendship. When asked if he had contacted Adrienne on the night of her death, David denied it, saying he was home studying with his girlfriend, Diane Zamora. The police investigated David as a possible suspect, seeking information from Adrienne's friends to see if she had ever mentioned him. However, one of her closest friends, who was privy to Adrienne's secrets, said Adrienne had never discussed David with her. The police also checked Adrienne's phone book and found David's number was not listed, which further led them to believe he was not involved in her murder. As a result, they never administered a polygraph test to David and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The police investigated Adrienne's boyfriend, Tracy Smith, as a suspect in her murder. However, they cleared him after verifying his alibi, which placed him out of town with his family on the night of the murder. Tracy also passed a polygraph test, further supporting his innocence. During his police interview, Tracy suggested they investigate someone named Brian, whom Adrienne had mentioned was calling her on the night of her murder while they were on the phone. The police identified the Brian in question as Brian McMillian, a local teenager. Their investigation into Brian McMillian revealed that he used to work at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrienne used to work. Brian had developed an obsession with Adrienne and would often visit the restaurant to catch a glimpse of her. Eventually, Adrienne grew tired of his constant presence and began hiding in the back whenever she saw him coming. The police questioned Brian McMillian about the murder of Adrienne Jones. At first, he claimed to have no knowledge of her, but later admitted to knowing her. When asked if he had talked to her on the night of her murder, Brian said he didn't remember. He explained that he had been drinking that night due to feelings of depression and loneliness. The officers also asked Brian if he had visited Adrienne's house on the night of her murder, and he acknowledged that he might have done so. The police asked Brian's father if his son could take a lie detector test, but his father refused. 1 week later, the police raided Brian's house with guns, a decision made due to concerns that he might be armed. The police took this precaution to ensure everyone's safety, including their own. After Brian was arrested for Adrienne's murder, many people came forward to show their support for him. Brian's friends said he was a gentle and non-violent person. His father also confirmed that Brian was at home all night when Adrienne was killed and didn't leave. Despite this, Brian was held in jail for 3 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, while the investigation and legal proceedings continued. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed successfully. After this, the district attorney's office had little evidence to link Brian to Adrienne's murder, so they released him from custody. 9 months into the investigation, the police in Mansfield, Texas, finally got a breakthrough, and it came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane Zamora was attending the Naval Academy. Diane Zamora, a cadet at the Naval Academy, allegedly confessed to her fellow students that she and her boyfriend, David Graham, had murdered a girl named Adrienne Jones in Mansfield, Texas. The Mansfield police traveled to Annapolis, Maryland, to interview Diane, but she denied making any such admission. The Naval Academy suspended Diane and sent her home pending an investigation. Since Diane was uncooperative, the police went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to question David. Initially, David claimed he didn't know why Diane would fabricate a story about killing Adrienne Jones. However, during the interview, David began to crack and asked to write a statement. In a 4.5-page confession letter, David detailed how he and Diane planned and carried out the murder of Adrienne Jones, including a cross-country event in November 1995, where he offered to drive Adrienne home. During the ride, David and Adrienne parked in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. Afterwards, David felt overwhelmed with guilt because he loved his girlfriend Diane deeply and knew that his infidelity would cause her immense pain. One evening, while David was helping Diane study for her SATs, they got into an argument. Unable to keep his secret any longer, David broke down in tears and confessed his infidelity to Diane. He told her that he had hooked up with Adrienne, which shattered Diane's heart and left her feeling deeply hurt and angry. Diane was inconsolable and lashed out at David, screaming and arguing with him. She was so angry that she wished he were dead, and she felt intense hatred towards Adrienne. Diane's emotions were too much to handle, and she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. David pleaded with Diane, promising to do whatever it took to save their relationship. David and Diane decided that the only way to repair their relationship was to kill Adrienne. In his confession letter, David admitted that on December 3rd, he called Adrienne Jones and asked her to secretly leave her house late at night to meet with him. He specifically asked Adrienne to keep their meeting private and not tell anyone else about it. David originally planned to lure Adrienne into a trap, kill her by breaking her neck, and then dispose of her body in a lake. On the agreed night, at 2:30 a.m., David picked up Adrienne in his car while Diane hid in the hatchback. They drove to a secluded spot 10 miles out of town, turning off the highway onto Satan Road. David stopped the car, and Adrienne subtly adjusted her seat, creating the impression they were about to be intimate. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, David had secretly signaled for Diane to emerge from the trunk. Diane came out of the rear of the vehicle and approached the front. Diane confronted Adrienne, who was seated in the passenger seat. Diane then hit Adrienne on the head with a weight from David's gym set. Despite being severely injured, Adrienne managed to escape by crawling out of the car window. David and Diane panicked, and David grabbed his 9mm Makarov weapon to chase after Adrienne. Adrienne was severely injured and collapsed in a nearby field due to her head wound. When David caught up to her, he shot her twice and then returned to his car. After Adrienne died, David and his accomplice Diane exchanged "I love you" as their first words to each other. The police later questioned Diane, who had a statement prepared to confess her involvement. David and Diane were arrested and charged with capital murder. Although they initially confessed, they later retracted their statements, with David claiming Diane acted alone and Diane alleging David committed the crime by himself. In 1998, Adrienne's mother requested that the death penalty be removed as a possible sentence for David and Diane. Diane's trial began in February 1998. Multiple witnesses testified that Diane showed no remorse for killing Adrienne. The jury found Diane guilty of capital murder, resulting in an automatic life imprisonment sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. David Graham was convicted of murdering Adrienne Jones and received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Channin Starbuck. Channin Starbuck, a 42-year-old woman, was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana, as the youngest child with two older brothers. Her parents eventually divorced and started new families, resulting in additional siblings for Channin. On December 3, 2011, Channin was discovered on the floor of her bedroom, positioned in a suggestive manner. An erotic massager was placed on her stomach, indicating a clear attempt to humiliate her after death. The police immediately suspected foul play due to the numerous bruises and scrapes on her body. A medical examiner later confirmed that some of the injuries were caused by a stun gun, and evidence suggested that her body had been moved. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The detectives assigned to solve the case faced a difficult task. They needed to reconstruct the final hours of Channin's life and identify the perpetrator. Channin, a mother of 5, had been reported missing by her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, a day before her body was found. Clay, 47, had alerted the authorities that he had been unable to contact Channin since December 1 at approximately 3 p.m. Channin sent a text to her daughter, saying she couldn't pick up the kids from school because she wasn't feeling well. She asked them to wait for their father, claiming she had already informed him of the change in plans. However, his phone was turned off, so he didn't know what was going on. The younger siblings, Marshall and Serena, were tired and hungry, so 15-year-old Logan decided to call her older brother Austin for help. She asked him to drive them to their father's house, which was just a couple of blocks away. When they arrived, Austin said he couldn't reach their mother either. He thought maybe she had turned off her phone to rest. Austin put the kids in the car and drove them to their father's house. Clay was surprised to see them but was happy to spend time with his kids. Since the older kids had lived with him after the divorce, and the younger ones had stayed with their mother, Clay decided to enjoy the unexpected visit and didn't contact Channin. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened with her. Clay expected to see Channon at the school basketball game that evening, but she didn't show up. The next day, December 2nd, Clay took the kids to school and then went to Channon's house. The front door was locked and the blinds were closed. Since he didn't have a spare key, he couldn't get in. Clay sent a message saying that if Channon didn't show up by 7 p.m., he would contact the police. After waiting until the agreed time, Clay went to the police station to report Channon Starbuck's disappearance. 2 sheriff's deputies visited her address but found nothing suspicious, so they returned to the station. The officer told Clay to wait one more day. If he still hadn't heard from Channon after that, he should return to the station. The next day, Clay returned to the police station, and it was then that he discovered he wasn't the only one looking for Channon. A friend and her mother had also reported being unable to contact her, which was unusual for Channon. This new information prompted the police to take the case more seriously. It had been 48 hours since Channon's disappearance, and several people were worried about her. The police visited Channon's home again. Upon entering the residence, they found no signs of forced entry or robbery. Initially, everything appeared to be in order. However, when they entered Channon's bedroom, they discovered the disturbing truth. Channon Starbuck's disappearance was a result of a brutal murder. In her room, investigators found an unmade bed with a blanket nearby, but the sheet was missing and the mattress cover had red stains. Her cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts examined the room for fingerprints, finding 12 latent prints on the massager box and bathroom mirror, while some surfaces had been wiped clean. DNA analysis was conducted on traces found in common areas, and specialists took scrapings from under Channon's nails, face, and neck. Detectives believed the murder occurred after Channon got out of the shower, and her body was moved to the bed and then the floor. The missing sheet was found in a washing machine, suggesting the perpetrator tried to eliminate evidence. Clay arrived at Channon's house by noon to find out what had happened to his ex-wife. However, the scene at her yard was ominous, with yellow tape cordoning off the area, an ambulance, and several police cars parked near the lawn. Clay was the first to be informed of the tragic event. To gather more information about Channon and her lifestyle, the detectives questioned Clay after he had calmed down. He explained that he and his ex-wife had a morning routine where he would take the younger kids to school and she would pick them up afterwards. However, on December 1st, his car broke down a few blocks from home, disrupting their routine. Clay had texted Channon to ask her to take the kids to school. It was supposed to warm up around 11 a.m., but when he tried to start the car again, it still wouldn't start. He gave up and went back inside to take a nap. Clay slept for several hours without being disturbed, during which time his cell phone ran out of battery. To support his story, he showed the police his correspondence with his ex-wife, Channon. Initially, everything seemed to add up. Clay was cooperative, providing his cell phone, DNA, and fingerprints. He also expressed concern for Channon, explaining that their divorce had made her more vulnerable. When asked for more information, Clay revealed that Channon had joined a dating site after becoming single. As an attractive woman, she had many admirers. According to Clay, she might have been seeing multiple people at the same time, and one of them might have been responsible for her death. Unfortunately, he didn't have any specific names to share. During the conversation, Clay became emotional and cried, struggling to accept Channon's death. After recording his statement, the police sent him home. He had to break the news of their mother's death to their children. At the start of the investigation, the case surrounding Channon Starbuck's demise was gathering momentum. Investigators questioned the Channon family's neighbors, focusing on every detail, especially reports of unfamiliar people and vehicles in recent weeks. An autopsy revealed severe injuries, including chest trauma consistent with the use of a stun gun, 10 broken ribs, and head and body injuries likely caused by a blunt object. The severity of the injuries made it difficult to determine the exact time of death, but the expert estimated that Shannon's life ended between December 1st and 2. Scratches on her body suggested that she had been moved, and her broken neck bones supported this theory. The medical examiner found evidence of strangulation using a soft object, possibly a hand, towel, or sheet. A breakthrough in the case came from the analysis of body samples, which revealed male DNA. This suggested that the suspect might be one of Shannon's close male acquaintances, including her ex-husband or secret admirers. Clay Starbuck, her ex-husband, has cooperated fully with the investigation, including undergoing a medical examination to check for any injuries or harm. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator might have been injured during the struggle, but Clay showed no signs of injury on his hands. The investigators then examined their sons, 21-year-old Austin and 18-year-old Blake. The only issue that arose was the presence of old cuts on the older son's hands, but these were explained by his job at a window manufacturing plant. During conversations with the sons, some facts were established that would later become clearer. The children knew that after the divorce, their mother had been dating and they disapproved of it. They had seen explicit photos on their mother's laptop, leading them to wonder if she might have been targeted by an online predator. It was clear that the sons loved their mother and were deeply shaken by her death. However, they had disagreed with the changes she had been making in her life. In a subsequent interview, Clay expressed himself more clearly. He blamed Shannon's behavior for his family's problems while he was away on business, especially her frequent encounters with other men. Clay even suspected that Marshall might not be his biological son, but he loved him regardless. Clay believed that after their relationship ended, Shannon started to indulge excessively and not appropriately for her age. He disapproved of her dropping off the kids at his place when she went on dates. By this point, investigators had not only spoken to Clay and the children but also interviewed Shannon's relatives and friends. The detectives developed a more comprehensive understanding of the deceased and her family. Shannon had always dreamed of having a big, loving family. Growing up, she was a kind and modest person who loved to draw and was very good at it, winning many awards. At 20, she met 25-year-old Clay Starbuck in Florida, where she had moved with her family when she was young. Clay was on vacation from Alaska. They were introduced by friends at a party and hit it off right away. That night, Shannon learned a lot about Clay. He had gone to school in Colorado to learn about diesel mechanics and later worked on the Trans-Alaskan pipeline, which paid well. However, he was already married with 2 kids. Despite his complicated past, Shannon wasn't discouraged. She actually saw it as a plus, thinking it gave him valuable experience for their future together. Shannon and Clay got married soon after meeting. As Clay's new wife, she moved in with her husband. At first, she struggled to adjust to her new surroundings and the weather, but she quickly settled in. Shannon's married life wasn't as perfect as she had envisioned. Her husband Clay was often away, leaving her to manage the household by herself. However, her love for him gave her the strength to carry on, knowing that his work shifts would eventually end and he would return to her. In the meantime, she took on the role of mother to his children from his previous marriage and soon gave birth to their own son, Austin, followed by another son, Blake, 3 years later. In 1996, they welcomed a daughter, Logan, who was later diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Shannon accepted her daughter's diagnosis with love and care, becoming her closest companion. The family was later completed with the arrival of another daughter, Serena. Shannon devoted herself to her children's well-being, education, and spiritual growth. She was also known for her cooking, crafts, and other hobbies within their community. However, she was so focused on being a caring mother and a loving wife that she didn't realize her husband was having an affair at work. When she discovered his affair, she felt deeply betrayed and shocked. This led her to file for divorce in 2000, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She still had feelings for her ex-husband, so she moved to Arizona to start fresh and ease the pain of their separation. There, she attempted to start a new relationship, but it didn't work out because she realized she still loved her ex, Clay. Clay was also reaching out to her and asking her to come back, claiming he had changed. Believing him, she gave him another chance. In 2001, they had a son named Marshall, their fifth child. However, instead of strengthening their relationship, Marshall's birth created new tensions. Even when they formally remarried in 2006, their relationship remained strained. 6 months later, the family moved to Deer Park, Washington. Clay's work kept him away, leaving Shannon to care for the children and manage the household. She kept her family entertained by organizing outings and parties at home. However, the frequent time spent apart put a strain on her marriage, creating doubts and mistrust that eventually led to a permanent separation in 2010. Crossing into her 40s, Shannon started to rebuild her life with the hope of finding love again. She was determined not to give up or make the same mistakes as before. Even when her ex-husband Clay suffered a serious injury, Shannon chose not to go back to him. However, she still provided him with support and help. In February 2011, Clay quit his job and moved to Deer Park to be closer to his children in Shannon. Although he hoped Shannon would take him back, she didn't feel the same way. She had finally found freedom and was enjoying it. After Clay's surgery, Austin and Blake moved in with him, enjoying more independence from their mother. Shannon started a new chapter, finding a part-time job and enrolling in a dental assistant course to support her family since Clay stopped paying child support due to illness. The children stayed with Clay on Wednesdays and every other weekend. By summer's end, Shannon completed her certification and was ready for her next goal. Shannon Starbuck had been seeking a fresh start, creating a dating profile in hopes of meeting someone special and leaving her past heartache behind. She regretted spending her best years with a man who didn't appreciate her and was capable of deceit. Tragically, her dreams were cut short one December morning when she became Shannon of a heinous crime. Her funeral, held on December 10, 2011, was attended by a large number of people, a testament to her bright and sincere personality. She was laid to rest at a cemetery in Orlando. The investigation into her death was swift, thanks to public attention. Detectives focused on her ex-husband Clay, verifying his alibi for December 1st. His fingerprints didn't match those at the crime scene, so they checked his story against databases and examined Shannon's phone, laptop, and diary for other potential suspects. Detectives thoroughly examined Shannon's mobile phone, leading them to add several individuals to the list of suspects. These men had been in contact with her through a dating site, raising suspicions about their potential involvement. One suspect, Tom Walker, had arranged a date with Shannon for December 5th, just hours before her death. Their conversations had been candid, and they had exchanged photos. However, when Tom Walker requested that Shannon take a photo using an adult toy, she declined. Notably, her body was later discovered in the exact pose that Tom Walker had mentioned. Within an hour, detectives located Tom Walker, who was shocked not only by the news of Shannon's death but also by being considered a suspect. He promptly provided an explanation for his activities on the day of her death, which was corroborated by his colleagues and surveillance footage. The next individual on the list was John Wilson, who had scheduled a meeting with Shannon on December 1st. An examination of their correspondence revealed. The investigation revealed that the suitor, whose real name was John Kinlawn, had no intention of a serious relationship with Shannon and had used a fake identity. He was married and worked in a different field than he claimed, which explained his secretive behavior. When questioned, Kinlawn had an alibi for the time of the crime, which was corroborated, and he was released after providing a DNA sample. The investigation was back to square one, But a breakthrough came when detectives examined Channon's mobile phone. They discovered that a 911 call had been made from the phone on the morning of December 1st, but it had been deleted from the call log. After retrieving the call, they found it contained only the sounds of sobbing and rustling before abruptly ending. Channon's phone records revealed a failed call and 11 messages sent after her death. GPS data confirmed her phone was at home, where she was killed after dropping her kids at school. The suspect tried to mislead the investigation and was found to be close to the Channon family, even using a nickname for the youngest son. After uncovering this information, Clay's statements were examined more closely. He had a clear motive for killing his ex-wife, as divorce can be difficult for some partners to accept. Additionally, he had the perfect opportunity, knowing her daily routine. As a result, authorities decided to track the suspect's car route again, this time using footage from street surveillance cameras. This is when the officers' suspicions became clearer. It turned out that Clay's car had not broken down. At the same time, results from another analysis arrived, showing that DNA material collected from Channon's body matched the suspect's samples exactly. When Channon returned home, a heated argument broke out, which ultimately led to her death. The unusual position of her body was a deliberate act of vengeance by Clay, who was enraged by her newfound freedom. After the murder, Clay stayed in the house and impersonated Channon in text messages. It became clear that his intentions to harm her may have been long-standing. A friend's conversation with detectives took on new significance, revealing that Clay and Channon's relationship was troubled. Channon had confided in friends that she was tired of Clay's controlling behavior and criticism, and had feared he might harm her if she ever left him. In fact, Channon had contacted the police multiple times between June and November 2011, reporting that Clay was stalking her and making her feel unsafe in her own home. She had become so fearful that she refused to give anyone a spare key to her house. Ultimately, Channon secured a restraining order against Clay, limiting their communication to text messages. A thorough examination of her diary revealed that she not only feared her former lover but also believed he was manipulating their children against her. Clay had been spreading vicious rumors and portraying her as promiscuous. As a result, when he was arrested on February 6, 2012, the children refused to believe he was involved. The discovery of a tracking program on Channon's laptop, a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop computer, in Clay's house, and printed correspondences did not seem to disturb them. The older children questioned the authenticity of the DNA analysis, thinking the accusations against their father were unbelievable and the case was fabricated. However, law enforcement and other relatives had a different perspective. At the trial, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of physical evidence and testimonies, confidently demonstrating Clay's guilt. In June 2013, justice was served when Clay Starbuck was found guilty of first-degree deprivation of life under aggravating circumstances and disrespect to human remains. He was sentenced to life without parole. His 2015 appeal was denied. He's serving time in Spokane County. Channon's family grieves her loss, but the children siding with their father hurts more. His obsession led to revenge, leaving the children without a mother or father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Su Xingqi. Tam Xing Fai, a 43-years-old faculty member, was noticeably absent from work, sparking concern among his colleagues. On July 4th, a coworker named Ma tried to reach him on his mobile phone at 11 a.m., but there was no answer. Ma wasn't immediately worried, assuming Tam Xing Fai was busy taking care of his family's adopted dog, which had a skin disease and was scheduled to visit the vet. However, when Xing Fai failed to show up for a meeting at the university's finance department on July 5th, Ma's concern grew. He tried calling Xing Fai's mobile phone again, but there was still no answer. Unfortunately, Ma didn't have Xing Fai's landline phone number, so he couldn't try contacting him that way. By July 6th, Xing Fai had been absent from work for 2 days with no communication with his colleagues. One of his coworkers finally reported the situation to the finance department, which prompted Xing Fai's superiors to call his landline phone. Unfortunately, no one answered that call either. The police contacted the library where Helen Tong Yin-yi, the 33-year-old wife of the missing man. Library staff reported that she was also absent from work without prior notice. They, originally from Zhongshan in Guangdong Province, China, had been married for 11 years and had 2 daughters, Hiu Man, 10, and Hiu Ing, 7 years old. Despite their difficult living conditions and financial struggles, the family was known to be kind, happy, and cheerful. They lived in an abandoned recycling station on Waju South Road, but Xing Fai often took his daughters on outings to have fun in town. Their children were well behaved, and the family seemed to be a happy one. Given their circumstances, it was possible that the family had decided to take a vacation together. However, something unexpected must have happened, preventing them from returning. Xing Fai's colleagues repeatedly tried to contact him by phone, hoping for a response. Eventually, someone answered, but to their surprise, it was a middle-aged man with an unfamiliar voice, not a member of the family. A man claiming to be Xing Fai's cousin called his workplace, stating that the family had taken a summer vacation to Guangdong Province in mainland China. He allegedly received Xing Fai's phone for safekeeping, but couldn't provide a return date for the family. However, the call only heightened suspicion among Xing Fai's coworkers. They found it out of character for Xing Fai to suddenly leave without notice, as he was a diligent and organized person. If he planned a vacation, he would have arranged it with his children's school in advance. Moreover, the family was responsible for 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would care for them. Xing Fai's family situation also raised questions. His father, a sailor, had gone missing, and his mother was living in a nursing home due to illness. Xing Fai regularly visited her every week, making it unlikely that he would abandon her to go on vacation. Eventually, the police were called. One of Xing Fai's colleagues accompanied them to his home, an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During the trip, a suspicious person was spotted. A short man was seen from a distance near the Xing Fai family's fence before quickly disappearing. Initially, no attention was paid to this, and they continued on. Upon arrival, they found the gate to Xing Fai's home locked. The police investigated the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covered a large area of approximately 450 square meters, but most of it was empty space, about 350 square meters of flower beds. The construction area was only about 90 square meters, and the building was constructed illegally. The original owner had built several tin houses on the site, using it as a waste recycling facility. A stone house on the opposite side was used as a pig farm, with very few people living in the area. As a result, the police only had one neighbor to question, an elderly woman named Wang who lived alone across the street. Wang claimed to have known the family's schedule and reported that they usually tended to their garden in the afternoon. Su Wang had limited knowledge of the family's personal lives, mainly due to their remote location. She was aware that the family didn't receive many visitors, and the only relative she knew of was Xing Fai's cousin, Su Xingqi. Wang didn't have information about Su Xingqi's address or that of Xing Fai's uncle, who supposedly lived in a nearby stone house. When the police questioned Xing Fai's colleague, they learned that a cousin had answered Xing Fai's phone, leading the police to believe it was Su Xingqi. However, Wang clarified that she didn't know Su Xingqi's address. She did report hearing cries for help from the house on July 5th. In response, the police conducted door-to-door inquiries in Pingqi village and eventually tracked down a man matching Wang's description at a stone house on Huazhu Road. The man, 42 years old Zhu Shenqi, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin and stated that he occasionally visited the family home to help with renovations and gardening. When questioned about the phone call, Zhu Shenqi maintained that the family had gone on vacation to China. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home and then returned home to inform Zhu Shenqi that he planned to travel to Dongguan, China for a few days. Due to the high roaming fees, Xing Fai asked Zhu Shenqi to hold on to his Hong Kong mobile phone until he returned. The person seen fleeing the scene by police and Xing Fai's colleague was actually Zhu Shenqi, who was leaving after feeding the family dogs. Zhu Shenqi's behavior and expressions were observed, and he appeared to be telling the truth. His story seemed consistent, and there were no obvious discrepancies. When asked if he had a key to the family home, Zhu Shenqi denied it. Despite finding Zhu Shenqi, the police continued their investigation. Going door to door in the village. A local resident reported a stranger borrowed money from a villager, leading to a heated argument. The villager threatened to seek compensation from Xing Fai's family, who were struggling financially due to his mother's hospitalization and existing debts. The villagers initially believed the stranger was not Zhu Shenqi, but they suspected the family might be hiding to escape their debts. However, when the police inquired about Zhu Shenqi, the villagers revealed that he had been dishonest. They confirmed that Zhu Shenqi regularly visited the Xing Fai's home to perform maintenance and repairs, and he was always able to enter the house on his own, even when no one else was present. This information led the police to conclude that Zhu Shenqi must have had a key or access to the home Xing Fai's. In fact, he did have a key, which Xing Fai had given to him, as witnessed by Wang. When the police asked Zhu Shenqi for the key, he initially denied owning one, claiming he used a spare key for renovations that he had returned. However, his demeanor had changed, and he was avoiding key details. When the police threatened to search his home, Zhu Shenqi became agitated and suddenly remembered another house key that he had not returned. He retrieved the key from his dresser and handed it over to the police. Although Zhu Shenqi's behavior was suspicious, there was no direct evidence linking him to the family's disappearance. As a result, the police placed him under surveillance while continuing their investigation. During their investigation, police used a spare key to enter the home, where they found a scene of disarray and evidence of a ransacking. Fresh blood stains on the walls suggested that a violent incident had occurred on the property. The presence of a sink full of dirty dishes in the kitchen raised suspicions about the family's claim to have traveled to China, as it seemed unlikely they would have left their home in such a state before departing. A search of the master bedroom turned up the family's identification cards in a dresser, which prompted the lead investigator to contact the border crossing office. The office reported that the family had not left Hong Kong. Further investigation of the house uncovered a blood-stained shirt in a side room and a blood-stained plastic water pipe in the corner. Police then deployed sniffer dogs to search for additional evidence and potentially locate the missing family members. The dogs detected a scent and discovered blood stains under recently disturbed soil 9 meters away. Furthermore, despite it being summer vacation, their children, Hiu Man and Hiu Ain, were enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family would not have been on vacation. It became clear that the family had been victims of a crime, so a special team was set up to investigate. Due to the late hour, the police cordoned off the scene, restricted access to Pingqi village. Zhu Shenqi was confined to home. He was the prime suspect in the case. Zhu Shenqi promptly confessed. According to Zhu Shenqi's statement, he was from Huanpu in Guangdong province and typically resided with his sister, wife, and 2 sons, aged 15 and 16, who suffered from memory issues. Zhu Shenqi previously earned a living selling motorcycles in Junction City. However, Following Guangdong's ban on motorcycles in 2006, sales plummeted. Financial struggles led him to reach out to his cousin, Xing Fai, in Hong Kong, seeking employment opportunities. Xing Fai helped Su Xingqi secure a construction job that provided a daily salary of 500 Hong Kong dollars, including accommodation and meals. After working for half a month, Su Xingqi became dissatisfied with his salary, which was reduced to 220 Hong Kong dollars due to company deductions. He impulsively quit his job and returned to China. However, in 2007, a typhoon damaged his home, and he needed money for repairs. Su Xingqi asked Xing Fai to help him find work in Hong Kong again. When Xing Fai couldn't find him a job, he proposed an alternative arrangement. Xing Fai would pay Su Xingqi from his own salary to help with household chores and repairs at his home. Su Xingqi accepted this offer and began traveling to Hong Kong every other month to work on Xing Fai's home and garden. Su Xingqi claims that he and Tong Yanyi, Xing Fai's wife, began a clandestine romantic relationship. However, Xing Fai discovered their relationship on July 3rd. On July 5th, Su Xingqi accompanied Xing Fai to a nursing home to visit his mother. Su Xingqi snuck out of the nursing home to return home and continue his affair with Yanyi. Unexpectedly, Xing Fai returned home early and, in a fit of rage, physically confronted Su Xingqi. In a state of panic, the man grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai until he fell to the ground, dead. Overwhelmed by what had just happened, he wanted to turn himself in to the police. However, Su Xingqi refused to let that happen. Since he couldn't change his mind, Su Xingqi decided to kill Xing Fai. Su Xingqi found some wires in the corner of the room, charged at him, knocked him to the ground, and tied his hands behind his back. Su Xingqi then covered Xing Fai's mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over his head. Before this, their two children were in their bedroom watching cartoons. They heard the commotion and their parents warning to run away, but instead, they ran towards their parents and saw their father dead and Su Xingqi in the process of killing their mother. The children ran back to their room, crying, and locked the door. Since the parent was already tied up, Su Xingqi left to pursue the children. Su Xingqi picked up a pair of pliers, opened the door, and used more wires to restrain the children. He tied their hands behind their backs, covered their mouths and noses with tape, and put plastic bags over their heads. The children, Hiu Ing and Hiu Man, also suffocated shortly after. After killing the whole family, Su Xingqi was at a loss of what to do next. He turned to his home to think it over. He thought that hiding them in a ditch or body of water would be too easy to find, and that dismembering them would be too exhausting and time-consuming. So he settled on burying them on their own property. On July 6th, he returned to the home to try and clean up as many blood stains as he could find. He then got to work on digging the hole. He dug a hole deep and wide enough to hold the family of 4 and quickly placed their bodies inside of it. He also disposed of the murder weapons in the pit before filling it back in. The police believed Su Xingqi's story, despite being skeptical about his motive, and took him to the location where he claimed the crime had taken place. He pointed out the spot where the sharp knife, water pipe, iron pliers, and other tools used in the crime were hidden. On July 7th, the police called in the fire department to assist in unearthing the remains. The firefighters arrived with excavation tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. However, they quickly encountered a problem when they hit a layer of cement while digging. It turned out that Su Xingqi had failed to mention in his confession that he had filled the pit with cement before covering it up. The firefighters were unable to break through the cement with their tools, and the police had to call in a private engineering company for assistance. The engineers arrived with high-grade tools and began drilling through the concrete slab. However, when they reached a point where they saw human hair, they became uneasy and refused to continue digging, not wanting to encounter a dead body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to resume the excavation. After excavating the pit, authorities found it to be 2.5 meters wide and 6 feet deep. The bodies of the 4 family members were discovered at the bottom, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. Xing Fai's body was at the very bottom. His hands and feet were bound with electric wire, and he had multiple stab wounds to his abdomen, back, and neck, with his clothes stained red with blood. The other family members were similarly bound with electric wire. Yanyi's mouth and nose were covered with tape, her hands and feet were bound, and her face was distorted. 2 family members, Hiu Man and Hiu Ing, showed no obvious signs of trauma, leading police to suspect they may have been buried alive. Su Xingqi was formally arrested and interrogated. During the interrogation, he altered his confession. He admitted that he lied about the affair. Shan Hui kicked Su Xingqi out of the house and banned him from returning. Despite this, Su Xingqi came back to apologize and was surprisingly forgiven by Xing Fai. Su Xingqi returned to the house on July 3 to start working, and it seemed that his relationship with Xing Fai had been repaired. However, on July 4, Su Xingqi attempted to molest a family member. Su Xingqi fled the house in a rage, not wanting to alert the neighbors. The next day, Su Xingqi tried to force his way into the house again, claiming he wanted to apologize. However, Xing Fai had anticipated this and returned home early. They got into an argument, which escalated into Su Xingqi stabbing Xing Fai. Su Xingqi's later confession matched his initial one, but with the additional detail of filling a makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were taken away for autopsy, it was discovered that Su Xingqi's account of the events was inaccurate. The autopsy revealed that Xing Fai's murder was more brutal than initially described. Xing Fai had sustained 9 stab wounds to the head and neck, nearly 80 stab wounds to the body, and 10 stab wounds to the hands and feet. Contrary to Su Xingqi's claim, Xing Fai was strangled, not suffocated with a plastic bag. Hiu Ying's cause of death was the only accurate part of Su Xingqi's account. Forensic analysis of the home found at the cutlery and dishes did not have the family's DNA on them, but they did have Su Xingqi's DNA. This suggested that Xing Fai was not killed in the kitchen, but rather elsewhere in the house. The investigation also revealed that the murder was premeditated, as the cement used to bury the bodies had been purchased by Su Xingqi prior to the murder. Furthermore, the weapon used was not a kitchen knife from the family, but rather one belonging to Su Xingqi. Additional investigations by the police found that the family's bank cards had been used at an ATM after the time of death, but no money could be withdrawn due to repeated failed PIN number guesses. The cash and bank cards belonging to the family were also missing. Su Xingqi's motive for the crime was robbery, and it was premeditated. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in his story, he would suddenly come up with a new explanation. According to Su Xingqi, his family's ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs, and his 2 children required 100,000 in cash to cover their school fees. He was not well liked in his local community, so he knew it would be difficult to borrow money from his neighbors. He turned to Xing Fai for help because his business trips to Hong Kong had not generated enough income. Su Xingqi suspected that Su Xingqi was wealthier than he seemed and that he is very stingy. The reason for his low salary during his time working for Xing Fai was that they were exploiting him for low-cost labor. On July 3, Su Xingqi traveled to Hong Kong without informing anyone and waited until July 5, when they had a day off from work. When Xing Fai returned home and found Su Xingqi there, he asked if he needed to cook something, and they men went to the kitchen together. Su Xingqi asked to borrow 1 million Hong Kong dollars, but Xing Fai rejected the request. He explained that he had to use the money for his mother's medical treatment and his daughter's education. However, Su Xingqi didn't believe him and accused Xing Fai of only using him for cost labor. Xing Fai became angry and ordered Su Xingqi to leave. As Xing Fai turned his back, with a concealed knife on, Xingqi attacked him from behind, covering his mouth and stabbing him. Su Xingqi then restrained in Hiu Ying and Hiu Man and began searching the house for cash and bank cards. He demanded to know the password for the bank cards, and Xing Fai intentionally gave him a fake password. Su Xingqi didn't realize this at the time. Su Xingqi claimed that he had killed others by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting a plastic bag over their head. However, when he went to the nearest ATM to withdraw cash, he discovered that the PIN number he had been given didn't work, and realized that Xing Fai had lied to him. Upon returning home, Su Xingqi discovered that everyone had suffocated to death in his absence. He found the food he and the others had been preparing and decided to eat it next to the 4 corpses while contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. After stealing $6,000 in Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai's body, Su Xingqi buried the corpses and tools in a small pit, then went to sleep at Xing Fai home. The next morning, Su Xingqi realized that the smell from the bodies might lead to their discovery, so he bought cement and returned to the home. He dug up the pit, poured in the cement, and refilled the hole. Su Xingqi then stayed at the home to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or house phone, telling callers that he was taking care of things while the Xing Fai family is on vacation. However, Su Xingqi did not expect his ruse to be uncovered so quickly. Even later, he continued to lie about many details, including when he bought the cement and the cause of Yan Yi's death. At this stage, the police didn't think they needed to continue obtaining an accurate confession. In their opinion, they had collected enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place at the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010. Su Xingqi initially pleaded not guilty and altered his previous statement. He claimed that his original story about the affair was true and that Xing Fai was killed in self-defense, while Hiu Man and Hiu Ying were killed accidentally. The defendant stated that he had falsely confessed to extortion and murder brutality, which included physical abuse and suffocation. On November 23, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict for the murders of Xing Fai and Yan Yi. However, the defendant was acquitted of murdering Hiu Ying. Despite this, the defendant received a life sentence for the 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The presiding judge criticized the defendant, describing him as lacking a conscience and being unrepentant. The judge also accused the defendant of fabricating the self-defense story and affair to tarnish the victims' reputations. After Xing Fai's family death, who lived in Hong Kong, surprisingly defended him. They accused Xing Fai of being a hypocrite and the real villain. According to them, Xing Fai was exploiting Su Xingqi for cheap labor and taking his money. However, the neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village were outraged by these claims, forcing Su Xingqi's family to move back to China to avoid the backlash. The crime was considered one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. The community showed an outpouring of support for the family Xing Fai's, with many visiting their home to offer condolences. Netizens also raised more than enough money to cover the funeral expenses. Additionally, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family. Every year on July 5, the adoptive family would take the dogs for a walk in Ping Chi village, near the home of their former owners. On August 9, 2022, 55-year-old Su Xingqi passed away in Hong Kong's Stanley Prison due to liver cancer. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Eurydice Dixon. Eurydice Dixon was born on November 10, 1995 in Melbourne, Australia. Her family consists of her parents and younger sister. When Eurydice was 7 years old, her mother died of substance abuse, leaving her father to care for her 2 young daughters. Eurydice's father worked hard to provide for the 2 sisters, and they lived in a small apartment. Eurydice is a quiet and polite person. Eurydice has a deep passion for the arts, especially drama. She pursued her passion at Deakin University, studying drama and actively participating in the theater troupe. Eurydice is a multi-talented person, not only a comedian, but also a writer who creates her own performances. In 2018, when Eurydice was only 22 years old, she stepped on stage at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Her stand-up routine, "At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist," was a huge hit, much to the delight of the audience. Eurydice was known to her friends as quiet and introverted, but also extremely intelligent for her age. Both her friends and the audience agreed that she had a natural talent for comedy. To hone her skills, Eurydice performed for free at local bars, using these opportunities to gain experience, gain fans. On Tuesday, June 12, 2018, Eurydice performed at a local bar just 3 miles from her home. That night, as usual, she humorously addressed gender equality and her concerns through her performance. After the performance, Eurydice met her boyfriend, Tony Magnuson, who was sitting in the audience. They spent time together at the bar, drank a can of soda together, and stopped at a nearby supermarket to buy groceries. At around 10:40 p.m., Tony got on the tram to go home. Eurydice walked home alone, blowing Tony a kiss and waving goodbye. Eurydice's walk home was about 3 miles long, taking her through streets, a park, and 3 soccer fields. It usually took her about an hour to get home. And Eurydice, having walked this route at night many times before, she felt safe because the streets were well lit. However, as Eurydice entered Princess Park, darkness enveloped her. To shorten the distance, she put on shoes and socks and walked barefoot on the grass. She crossed the park and the soccer field, just a short distance from her house. At 12:02 a.m., Eurydice texted her boyfriend Tony on Facebook, "I'm almost home. Where are you?" At approximately 2:50 a.m. on June 13th, a passerby found Eurydice unconscious on the soccer field at Princess Park. Although the passerby attempted CPR after calling an ambulance and the police, it was unfortunately too late. Eurydice had been strangled and had passed away. Fortunately, the area around Princess Park had several surveillance cameras that had recorded Eurydice walking alone through the park earlier. In the video, a young man can be seen about 100 feet away from her. He has blonde hair, a scraggly beard, and appears overweight, short, and stocky. To aid in the investigation, the police released the surveillance footage to local television stations and asked the public to help identify the suspect. That evening, James Todd, 19, contacted the police after his friends reported seeing his face on the news in connection with the death of Eurydice Dixon. James strongly denied any involvement in the incident and insisted that the person in the surveillance video was not him. The police asked James to come to the police station for questioning. At the police station, James denied any involvement, answered 660 questions, and insisted that he had nothing to do with the case. James also agreed to provide a DNA sample. A memorial was set up for the victim, Eurydice Dixon, where her body was found. People brought flowers to pay their respects, and a large crowd gathered to pay their respects. 5 days after her death, a vigil was held at the football stadium in memory of Eurydice. However, the night before the vigil, someone painted a giant 75-foot-long male genitalia on the lawn. Firefighters and city workers found it impossible to remove the paint and were forced to dig up and replace entire sections of the lawn, costing $20,000. The person responsible for the vandalism was identified as Andrew Null, a 29-year-old men's rights activist and Scientologist. Andrew admitted that his motive was to incite anger among feminists. During a subsequent interview, police told James that DNA evidence from the crime scene was being analyzed. James' demeanor changed. He looked down and stated that no further testing was necessary. James Todd confessed that he had been at Princess Park on the night of the tragedy, taking full responsibility for the murder and assault of Eurydice Dixon that led to her tragic death. In November 2018, James Todd gave a detailed account of his actions on June 12. He began with university classes in Broadmeadows, a suburb of Melbourne, which ended at 3 p.m. He then met 3 friends at the train station. They bought alcohol and supplies and took the train to Melbourne. The group spent time in Batman Park, sharing a bottle of alcohol until it was gone. Around 8 p.m., James purchased more cider and cannabis from people in the area. After one friend left, James and the other 2 friends returned to the train station, bought another bottle of alcohol and Coca-Cola, and took the train back to Broadmeadows. They got off at different stations, with James being the first to get off the train at Newmarket Station around 9 p.m. James Todd left Newmarket Station at 9:30 and walked down the street. At 10:43, he saw Eurydice outside a supermarket with her boyfriend Tony. After stopping at McDonald's, James returned to the same spot and saw Eurydice. She blew a kiss goodbye to her boyfriend, then started walking home. James felt attracted to Eurydice, even though he did not know her. James decided to follow her, staying about 150 feet away for an hour, walking about 3 miles across the city. Whenever Eurydice slowed down, James would stop to smoke. A surveillance camera recorded them passing the University of Melbourne. About 45 minutes after James began following her. As she neared her home, Eurydice texted her boyfriend Tony to let him know she was coming home. She was walking through Prince's Park at this time. At around midnight, Eurydice, after sending a text message to her boyfriend, was walking home across the 3rd soccer field when Eurydice was attacked from behind by James Todd. He grabbed her hair and skirt, pushed her to the ground, and then sat on her chest, grabbing her by the neck. In self-defense, Eurydice fought back by scratching James' face, neck, and shoulders. However, she was still unable to escape from James. After satisfying his desires, James strangled Eurydice until she died. According to his statement to the police, James said he thought Eurydice was drunk when he first saw her. He wanted to talk to Eurydice. However, Eurydice's autopsy showed no alcohol or illegal substances in her body. Medical examiners determined that Eurydice's cause of death was strangulation, accompanied by blunt force trauma to the head and other parts of the body. After committing the crime, James took Eurydice's phone and left the park. James found a temporary shelter and slept until 4 a.m. When he woke up, James checked the injuries on his body and face by taking a selfie with his phone. Then, James took a shower. He took off the t-shirt with the skull and special words, and left it there. Then, James returned to the area near Princess Park, where the police were investigating the case. James observed from a distance, not entering the park area. Then, James went home, buying coffee and cake on the way. At 7 a.m., James arrived home and started searching for information about Princess Park on the internet. Later, a friend of James said that James appeared on a TV show in a news report about the girl's murder. James decided to contact the police station after receiving a call from his friend. James' girlfriend, a 4-year relationship, recalls that during intimate moments, James tended to be rough with her. However, when she took a closer look at James' internet search history, she discovered that James was searching for violent and extreme content. James Todd, 19, is a working and studying student who aspires to build a career in the restaurant industry. He lives with his parents and often stays up late to watch adult videos. In particular, movies with tragic endings for female characters make him want to recreate them in real life. James grew up in very difficult living conditions. James' family consisted of 5 members, his parents and 3 sons, with James being the middle child. They lived in a chaotic and uncared-for environment, with many pets and a kitchen that collapsed due to rotting floors. Food was often cooked in the bathroom on a simple stove, right next to the toilet that was often clogged. The entire house was a mess with cluttered furniture, trash and debris everywhere, with leftover food and garbage everywhere. James was rarely at home and often had to sleep on a desk in a classroom or on a park bench. His mother said that the poor condition of the house was partly due to her suffering from depression. However, James insisted that their house was always in a state of neglect, regardless of the cause. Information about the father's role in the family situation was not mentioned. Prior to the incident, James had been visiting the house less and instead spent more time at his girlfriend's house. His girlfriend noticed a change in his behavior and attributed it to the stress of college and his worries about his future. The police discovered that James had been diagnosed with mild autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as a child. As a teenager, James had been in and out of psychiatric care several times because his teachers were concerned about his antisocial behavior. However, it should be noted that autism or Asperger's syndrome can manifest in many different ways, but is not associated with dark or harmful sexual tendencies. In James' case, 2 psychiatrists worked with him and analyzed his situation thoroughly. The doctors concluded that James showed signs of sadistic personality disorder, a factor that may have contributed to the tragic events. Doctors believe that the combination of autism and sadistic elements in James's personality may have played a role in his tragic end. James' friends saw him as sociable, cheerful, and seemingly no different from other people. They noted that he was able to apologize, distinguish right from wrong, and behave rationally. The judge who heard the case concluded that James Todd intentionally killed Eurydice Dixon, motivated by perverse desires and the intention to act out his perverted fantasies. As a result, on September 2, 2019, James Todd was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. James Todd's father, Jason Todd, took to social media to express his condolences to Eurydice Dixon's family. In it, Jason shared his pain and anxiety at not being able to see his son again after the incident. Jason also revealed that he had faced a lot of abuse and criticism on social media. However, Jason later deleted all of these posts. Meanwhile, James' legal team was trying to appeal James' life sentence. They argued that the sentence was too harsh for James, who was 19 at the time and had no previous criminal record. The lawyers also cited numerous testimonies from people around him who described James as a good and kind person. The lawyers also pointed out that James fully admitted his guilt and expressed remorse. They also pointed out that James was autistic and had lived in poor conditions before the crime. However, the appeal was ultimately rejected. Police investigating the case say James is now living in significantly better conditions than his previous home. James still feels remorse for his actions. James' time in prison was harder than other prisoners. Psychiatrists say James would pose a serious threat to women if released. Following the death of Eurydice Dixon, the bar where she last performed comedy decided to cancel its comedy nights on Tuesdays in her memory. To continue Eurydice's legacy, the Melbourne government has introduced grants to support emerging female comedians. Andrew, who desecrated the Eurydice Dixon Memorial, was convicted and sentenced to 5 months in prison. Following the tragic death of Eurydice Dixon, police have advised women to be more careful at night, avoid walking alone, and always carry their phones. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Francis and a student at Tyler Junior College, majoring in English literature. She was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot, then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left. Or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds' locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple, and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop, when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, it is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions, however, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. The police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, the officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received the call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. The police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked, "For what?" She replied, "For putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house." Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced. Was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born in Iowa, USA, on November 13, 1979. He grew up in Cedar Falls, a city that is home to the University of Northern Iowa. As a young boy, Tyler joined the Boy Scouts, where he earned the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout. This experience sparked a lifelong love for nature and camping in him. The camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which promoted family bonding, were particularly enjoyable to him. In his free time, he learned to play the trumpet. Tyler's true passion, however, lay in adventure and sports. He was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team at Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls. He also enjoyed outdoor activities like canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Later, his interest in computing led him to Truman State University in Missouri, where he studied computer science and earned his degree. It was there that he met Sarah, who would later become his wife. Sarah was born on March 27, 1980, in Kansas City. During her childhood, she spent time near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam. Sharing Tyler's passion for the outdoors, Sarah enjoyed bird watching and studying insects. Like Tyler, she was a dedicated Girl Scout and earned the highest honor, the Gold Award. Her adventurous spirit was inherited from her mother, with whom she went on a backpacking trip to Central America. It's no wonder that Tyler knew Sarah was his soulmate when he met her as a student. Sarah excelled academically and demonstrated exceptional leadership skills, particularly in student projects focused on enhancing school life. Her positive leadership and inclination earned her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to Truman State University, where she met Tyler. As they fell deeply in love, she readily accepted his marriage proposal. Both Tyler's and Sarah's families supported their decision to marry, recognizing that they were perfect for each other and destined to build a beautiful family together. On June 22, 2002, guests gathered at St. John Lutheran Church for Tyler and Sarah's wedding. Family members took their seats, while Sarah waited outside with her father. At 22, the couple exchanged vows, promising to stay together until death parted them. They chose Boundary Waters for their 10-day honeymoon, sharing a love for nature. In the initial 10 years of their marriage, Tyler and Sarah prioritized establishing financial security and advancing their professional careers. After completing their undergraduate degrees in Missouri, the couple relocated to Lawrence, where they pursued their master's degrees at the University of Kansas. Sarah eventually worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler held jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, and UPS. He also had a long-term career at a company specializing in business billing and payments, which lasted for 18 years. During this period, the Schmidts' marriage was filled with exciting experiences beyond their professional commitments. The couple made it a point to spend quality time together, exploring new outdoor destinations and engaging in various activities. They regularly socialized with family and friends, bonding over their shared love of board games. Occasionally, they participated in events organized by the Lutheran Church. As enthusiastic fans of the Kansas Jayhawks, they attended basketball tournaments held at the Allen Fieldhouse. The year 2013 was a mix of sadness and happiness for the couple. They suffered a significant loss when Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack, leaving his loved ones in grief. However, 2 years later, in 2015, they experienced the joys of parenthood with the birth of their son, Arlo. In 2018, they welcomed their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, into the world. When Arlo turned 6 and Lula was 3, the family made the decision to move to Cedar Falls to be closer to Tyler's family. The community of Cedar Falls warmly welcomed them, and soon they became active members of it. Tyler continued his work as a software engineer, while Sarah took on a role as an assistant at the city's public library. The children enrolled in the preschool program at Lincoln Elementary School. Tyler and Sarah were renowned for their kind nature and willingness to lend a helping hand, making everyone around them feel valued and important. This dedication earned them the admiration and affection of their neighbors and the entire community. Similarly, at the library, Sarah's warm and friendly personality quickly made her a well-known and appreciated figure, both among her colleagues and the wider community. The couple instilled their passion for outdoor activities and nature in their children, Arlo and Lula. In 2021, they began taking their kids camping, and despite their busy schedules, the children loved these trips so much that the parents made time for them whenever possible. By mid-2022, Sarah's workload had increased significantly. She took a day off in June to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary and planned another day off in July for a family vacation. She had to finish a project for the library by July 26th, but was determined not to let it interfere with the family's plans. During the week of July 11th, Sarah told her brother's wife that she would be taking the kids camping at Makata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, a popular destination known for its 13 impressive caves and stunning natural landscapes. On Thursday, July 21st, the family packed up their car and drove 140 miles to reach Makata Caves. The Schmidt family, Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children, Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. As the camping area was crowded, they set up near the park's entrance. A few hours later, around 7 p.m., another family parked their vehicle about 200 feet from the initial family's tent. This family consisted of Joe and Cecilia Sherwin and their 23-year-old son Anthony, who hailed from Nebraska. The Sherwins proceeded to set up 2 separate tents, one for Joe and Cecilia, and another for their son Anthony. At the time, they were on their way back home following a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that had taken them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The journey had been an enjoyable experience, and it had brought Joe, Cecilia, and Anthony closer together. Anthony was a devoted son, praised by his mom for his kind and sensitive nature. He was an excellent student and entrepreneur, working on a lucrative business venture that would financially support his parents. Though his mom, Cecilia, didn't know the details, Anthony kept her updated, mentioning only that his project involved secure emails. At Makata Caves, the campers retired to their tents as night fell. However, their peaceful slumber was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. Just prior to the commotion, a man clad in black had entered the Schmidt's tent, attacking Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was awakened by his sister Lula's screams. As he turned, he was met with a horrifying sight: blood inside the tent. Frantic with fear, he managed to escape and ran to seek help. As he fled, he heard one final shot. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Joe, who were camped nearby, rushed out of their tent amidst the chaos. Joe searched frantically for his son among the campers, asking if anyone had seen him. Arlo, still in a state of panic, continued to run until he encountered the sheriffs. He was screaming for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Cecilia grasped his hand and ran with him to the park entrance. Once there, terrified and unsure of what had transpired, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was beside herself with worry, fearing that her son might be among the victims, since he had been sleeping near the tent where the shots had come from. Cecilia called the Jackson County 911 operator to report hearing gunshots, but she struggled to pronounce the name of the park where she was, making it difficult to convey her location. She explained that she was with a boy who claimed that his parents had been shot. The call between Cecilia and 911 lasted 23 minutes as she answered the operator's questions. The operator relayed the attack to the police and park rangers, but the call was briefly disconnected. Cecilia persisted and called back, only to be put on hold while the dispatcher contacted emergency responders. Despite the tense and nervous atmosphere in the park, Cecilia remained calm thanks to the adrenaline. After providing details about their exact location, she handed the phone to Arlo, the boy. He told the dispatcher that he was in a tent with his mom, sister, and dad, and when he woke up, he saw someone dressed in black holding a gun. When the 911 operator asked the child where his father was, he paused before responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police officers and paramedics arrived at the campsite to find a horrific scene. All occupants of the Schmitz tent were dead. The once peaceful campsite had become a crime scene. Law enforcement immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could have been anywhere. The tactical teams swiftly evacuated Macoka Cave State Park and Camp Shalom, a nearby Christian summer camp located 1.5 miles from the attack site. As officials evacuated visitors, they gathered them outside the park. Once everyone was accounted for, it was clear that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing, and he was armed. During an aerial search at 11 a.m., police found a body. Upon reaching it, they confirmed it was Anthony, deceased. Although an investigation was necessary, police identified him as the prime suspect in the homicides, believing he had committed the attack on the Schmitz before taking his own life. The authorities closed the park following the incident, a measure that remained in place until July 28th. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered their condolences, with their spokesperson expressing devastation on behalf of the entire team, stating that the event had shaken Iowa's tradition of enjoying its natural wonders. But the legacy would continue for the millions of families who recreate in Iowa's parks. As a mark of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the rest of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other political leaders, including the Iowa governor, who expressed horror at the attack and sorrow for the unimaginable tragedy. A U.S. House representative from Iowa tweeted that it was a senseless and horrific crime. Sarah's family was devastated when they lost her. Her sister was particularly heartbroken, feeling as though her life had been turned upside down. She couldn't accept that Sarah was gone, and that she would no longer be able to pick up the phone and talk to her or watch her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend the private funeral service, which was held at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. Meanwhile, as the loved ones of the Schmitz coped with their grief and tried to console and care for Arlo, the authorities continued their investigation into the brutal crime. According to the Iowa Department of Public Safety's findings, which were based on the autopsy results, Tyler died from a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. Sarah's death was caused by sharp force injuries alone, and their young daughter was both shot and strangled. In early August 2022, authorities officially identified Anthony Sherwin as the person responsible for the murder of the Schmidt family. Sherwin, 23, had no prior criminal record and acted alone before taking his own life, according to the police. The investigation failed to uncover any motive behind the attack. The assistant director of the Division of Criminal Investigation, clarified that there was no established connection between Anthony and the Schmidt family prior to the incident, despite them being neighboring campers. The Nebraska Police Department assisted in the investigation by searching the Sherwin family apartment, but found no suicide note or any indication that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. His Facebook page yielded no clues, as it was completely blank. Regarding the weapon used in the attack, the Assistant Director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation reported that a single hand-assembled firearm was recovered near Anthony's body. This type of weapon, commonly known as a ghost gun, is built by individuals using online purchased parts without restrictions, as they lack serial numbers, making them difficult to regulate and trace. Anthony's parents confirmed that their son had built his own weapon using online instructions. However, they clarified that he did this as a challenge, not because he wanted to own a gun. They emphasized that Anthony was responsible and had never hurt anyone or any animal. The parents, Cecilia and her husband, said their family had never owned guns before. But due to Nebraska's rising crime rates, they decided to acquire some. Because they were new to handling guns, they even took classes to learn how to use them properly. They brought the homemade gun on their trip to protect themselves from crime and possible bear attacks, which they had experienced before while camping. They intended to get rid of the gun later. When they returned home, Anthony's parents were determined to prove their son's innocence. They believed he was a victim of murder, not the killer. According to his mother, an independent autopsy report showed that Anthony had been shot twice, not once, as the police claimed. She was puzzled by how he could have shot himself a second time, which challenged the authorities' suicide theory. They also questioned the description of the clothing the attacker wore. Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker was wearing black, which didn't match what her son had on, green shorts she had given him the day before the tragedy occurred. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe claimed that the police did not reveal where they found Anthony's body, or whether the weapon he supposedly used to take his own life was the same one used in the attack on the Schmidts. Cecilia sent an email to the media outlining her concerns about the investigation into her son Anthony's death. She emphasized that Anthony had too many reasons to live and would not have abandoned everything in such a way. In her opinion, Anthony was incapable of killing and had no connection to the Schmidt family, and they had seen no signs of him planning an attack. When she asked investigators if they had conducted a ballistic test to confirm matches, they did not respond. Similarly, when Anthony's parents requested the final investigation report to commission an independent review, they received no response. In January 2023, a media outlet submitted a request for public records related to the case under Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act. The request included incident reports, investigation documents, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, Devin McClone from the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner responded that the requested records were not public, and the office could only share the immediate facts and circumstances of the case, as provided in the press release links. A few days after the tragedy, a media outlet emailed the official to ask if the weapon Anthony used to take his own life was the same one used in the murders, but she never responded. As it stands, the police believe that Anthony Sherwin was a random killer who brutally murdered 3 beloved members of a Cedar Falls family. However, the family of Cecilia and Joe refuses to accept that their son, who was kind and studious, was involved in the crime. They insist that he was another innocent victim and are determined to prove his innocence. Arlo, the sole survivor of the massacre, was taken in by his aunt and uncle in Cedar Falls. In an interview with a local newspaper, Sarah's brother proudly described his nephew as brave and reported that he was doing well mentally. The GoFundMe page set up after the tragedy continues to receive donations to support Arlo's care and education. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Georgia Williams. Shropshire, England, witnessed a tragic tale of a vibrant young woman, Georgia Williams, whose promising life was cruelly cut short, leaving a profound impact on the community. Georgia Williams was born on September 17, 1995, in Telford, Shropshire, England. Growing up in a tight-knit family with her parents, Lynette and Steve Williams, alongside her older sister Scarlett, Georgia's upbringing was filled with love and support from a young age. Georgia exhibited a compassionate nature, always eager to lend a helping hand and ensure the happiness of those around her. However, this admirable quality would eventually become a vulnerability. Despite facing bullying during her middle school years, Georgia's transition to high school marked a significant turning point. She found herself embraced by a circle of friends, becoming a popular and beloved figure within the school community. Her compassionate nature and leadership skills were evident as she ascended to the role of head girl, alongside her academic pursuits. Georgia pursued her passion for service by training as an air cadet, nurturing dreams of serving as an RAF paramedic in the future. Upon reaching 17 years old, Georgia secured a position at a local petrol station, where she quickly established rapport with her colleagues. Among them was Jamie Reynolds, a 22-year-old man who seemed withdrawn and disconnected from the group. Moved by her compassionate nature, Georgia extended a hand of friendship to Jamie, determined to help alleviate his sense of isolation through her efforts. Jamie gradually integrated into the social circle of their workplace, participating in group activities and forging connections with his colleagues. As time passed, Jamie found himself developing affection for Georgia, recognizing her as the only person who had shown him kindness and believed in his potential. Filled with hope, he began to consider the possibility that Georgia might reciprocate his feelings. Encouraged by this belief, Jamie gathered the courage to express his sentiments to Georgia, conveying his desire to pursue a romantic relationship with her, even envisioning the prospect of becoming her boyfriend. However, Georgia, aware of Jamie's emotions, politely declined his romantic advances. She conveyed her reluctance to engage in a romantic relationship and emphasized her commitment to preserving their friendship. Despite his disappointment over Georgia's lack of romantic interest, Jamie appeared to accept her decision and made efforts to maintain their friendship. Yet, beneath the surface, a concerning obsession and ominous fantasy began to take hold within him. During a shift together at the petrol station, Jamie confided in Georgia about his dissatisfaction with his current situation, expressing a desire to leave his job at the petrol station and pursue his passion. Jamie hinted that he was interested in forging a career aligned with his interests, and he was eager for Georgia's support. Eager to assist, Georgia engaged him in a conversation to explore his hobbies and passions, and she learned about Jamie's interest in photography. Georgia seized the opportunity to encourage him to pursue it as a potential career path. Enthusiastic about the idea, Jamie requested Georgia's assistance in creating a professional portfolio and proposed that she be his first model. Honoring her commitment to their friendship, Georgia agreed to assist, and together they scheduled a photo shoot for Sunday, May 26, 2013. The arrangement involved Georgia and a few mutual friends gathering at Jamie's parental home for the photo shoot. As Sunday approached, Georgia found herself torn between conflicting commitments, with her family hosting a barbecue and her long-unseen grandparents attending. Georgia contemplated canceling the photo shoot at the last minute. However, mindful of Jamie's reliance on her and unwilling to disappoint him, Georgia ultimately resolved to honor her commitment. Assuring her family that she would only be a brief 5-minute drive away from Jamie's residence, Georgia planned to swiftly capture a few photographs before rejoining her family. In doing so, she aimed to fulfill her obligations to both her friend and her family, ensuring that neither party would be let down. On that specific day, Georgia quickly got ready, styling her hair and applying makeup before putting on jeans and a leather jacket as she left home at 7:30 p.m. Her father complimented her, remarking on her beauty and comparing her appearance to Sandy from the movie Grease. With her family expecting her to return promptly, Georgia set out on her journey. However, as the hours passed without her arrival, concern began to grow among her loved ones. Initially, her mother dismissed the delay, assuming Georgia had become absorbed in the photo shoot or socializing with friends. Sending a text to inquire about the conclusion of the photo shoot, her mother received a response from Georgia, indicating that the photo shoot had ended some time ago and that she was spending time with friends, implying she might return home late. Unperturbed by the exchange, Georgia's mother interpreted the text as routine, observing the customary trio of kissy face emojis that often punctuated her daughter's messages. Given Georgia's responsible character, her mother harbored no suspicions of any trouble. As the night passed, Georgia's parents went to bed, expecting her to return home by morning. However, when they woke up the next day, their concern grew as Georgia was still absent. At 6:30 a.m., her mother texted her, asking for an explanation for her prolonged absence. It wasn't until 7:30 a.m. that a response came, stating that Georgia had stayed at a friend's house and her phone's battery was running low. She assured her mother that if she didn't respond further, it was because her phone was about to shut down. Unbeknownst to Georgia's mother, these messages were not written by her daughter, raising concerns as the situation became increasingly ominous. On May 27th, Georgia's parents expected her to return home after a music festival. However, when she did not arrive, they assumed she had gone directly to the festival from her friend's house. Nevertheless, they expected her back the next morning, as she had been eagerly anticipating her first driving lesson scheduled for that day. As the night wore on without Georgia's return, her parents grew increasingly anxious, waiting up late into the night. With no sign of her, panic set in, and they reached out to relatives and friends, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Yet, despite their efforts, no one had seen or heard from Georgia in days, deepening their concern and uncertainty. When Georgia failed to arrive and drive home the following morning for her eagerly anticipated driving lesson, her family took immediate action, reporting her disappearance to the police. Desperate for answers, they provided authorities with all the information they could gather. However, their knowledge was limited to Georgia's attendance at a photo shoot at Jamie Reynolds' residence, with no further details about her whereabouts or companions after that point. In response, the police launched an investigation, focusing their attention on Jamie Reynolds. What they uncovered about him was deeply unsettling, revealing disturbing details that raised further concerns about Georgia's safety. In 2008, Jamie had been involved in an incident where he attempted to strangle a teenage girl. Despite the seriousness of the situation, law enforcement opted for a cautionary approach, issuing Jamie a warning and allowing him to avoid facing charges. However, when authorities stumbled upon this troubling episode in Jamie's past, their suspicions intensified, with Jamie emerging as the prime suspect in Georgia Williams' disappearance. Police wasted no time in paying him a visit, arriving at his residence. Encountering silence upon knocking on the door, they resorted to forced entry, combing through the premises but finding no trace of Jamie. Thus, a frenzied manhunt ensued as authorities intensified their efforts to track down the elusive suspect. After thorough inquiries at the petrol station, it became evident that none of their co-workers had encountered Jamie or Georgia. Their absence from their shifts raised significant alarms, as they had deviated from their usual routine. Although Jamie's parents were unreachable due to their vacation, they provided authorities with crucial information regarding the registration of Jamie's van. Had with this vital lead, police across Shropshire promptly disseminated alerts to law enforcement agencies nationwide, urging them to be on high alert for Jamie's van. Before long, the authorities tracked down Jamie in Glasgow, Scotland, a staggering 200 miles from his home. His sudden departure from the country sent shockwaves, which served as a glaring indicator of suspicious behavior. On May 30th, the Glasgow police apprehended Jamie Reynolds at a modest hotel. Acting on suspicions of kidnapping, they took him into custody without delay, and he faced immediate interrogation regarding George's whereabouts. However, Jamie maintained ignorance of her location, offering no helpful insights to the investigators. Subsequently, he was escorted back to Shropshire for further questioning, as George's loved ones anxiously awaited updates. They received disheartening news regarding the investigation's progress. The grim outlook devastated the family, amplifying their anguish, with Jamie now detained as the primary suspect. Law enforcement seized the opportunity to search his residence thoroughly for any pertinent evidence. During the search, authorities stumbled upon a camera containing an SD card. However, their hopes of uncovering vital clues were dashed when they discovered that all files had been systematically deleted, leaving investigators to grapple with another frustrating setback. The camera underwent forensic examination at the police station, where experts diligently worked to retrieve the deleted files. Upon successful recovery, the retrieved data delivered a chilling conclusion to the investigation. Among the recovered files were several images captured on the day of the photo shoot, offering a haunting glimpse into Georgia's final moments. The initial photographs depicted Georgia in seemingly ordinary poses at the outset of the photo shoot, confirming her presence at Jamie's residence that fateful day. Despite her outward appearance of contentment and compliance, it was evident that Georgia remained unaware of the sinister intentions lurking beneath Jamie's facade. Tragically, she unwittingly walked into a perilous situation, unaware of the impending danger that ultimately befell her. As the authorities sifted through the images, the tone grew increasingly grim and unsettling. Subsequent photographs revealed a harrowing sequence of events, portraying a distraught Georgia stripped of her clothes, standing atop a red recycling bin, her hand seemingly bound behind her with a hanging rope ominously overhead. Tragically, the footage captured Jamie Reynolds' heinous act as he callously filmed Georgia's final moments, depicting her futile struggle for breath. Shockingly, he proceeded to engage in despicable acts of necrophilia, violating her lifeless body in various rooms of the house, including his parents' bed, to compound the horror. Jamie documented his depravity with hundreds of additional photographs, showcasing Georgia in degrading positions. He callously stripped her of her jewelry, preserving them as grotesque trophies of his heinous crime. The police relentlessly scoured Jamie's residence, unearthing a staggering collection of 16,800 graphic photographs and 72 distressing videos. These explicit materials depicted unimaginable acts of violence, including sexual assault and snuff films showcasing torture and murder. Shockingly, it became apparent that Jamie himself was actively engaged in the creation of his snuff film, a chilling revelation. In an admission, he confessed to deriving pleasure from acts of strangulation. Alarmed by their son's dark fascination, Jamie's parents abruptly cut short their vacation to meet with the authorities. During their conversation, they disclosed that Jamie had been exposed to this disturbing brand of ultra-violent pornography since he was just 14 years old. It is possible that his exposure to such content could have occurred even earlier. Though their intervention came about when they discovered his activities, they were unable to confiscate his laptop since he required it for school. They reached out to the internet provider and arranged for access to certain websites to be blocked. Nevertheless, at the age of 14, he independently contacted the internet provider and secured his own private Wi-Fi by making the payment, ensuring that his parents remained unaware of his continued access to these websites. When his parents initially discovered him viewing these videos, they grew alarmed and informed the police and Child Protective Services. However, they were informed that no action could be taken, as viewing such content was not deemed illegal. During the investigation, law enforcement discovered a collection of notepads containing 40 distinct narratives penned by Jamie. These stories revolved around the themes of inflicting harm, sexual assault, and the killing of women. Additionally, it was uncovered that Jamie had scoured social media platforms, printing and marking images of young girls with nooses around their necks. Among the narratives was one titled, "Georgia Williams in Surprise," mirroring the tragic events that befell Georgia. Authorities suspect that this particular narrative may have been a premeditated plan conceived from the outset to be actualized. Jamie initiated the writing process in January, completing it a mere 3 weeks before the murder occurred. Jamie stubbornly withheld any information regarding the whereabouts of George's body, vehemently maintaining his innocence. Faced with his refusal to cooperate, investigators embarked on a painstaking journey to retrace Jamie's movements from the Monday morning following George's murder. Their investigative trail commenced at the petrol station where surveillance footage captured Jamie refueling his vehicle, unaware that George's lifeless body lay concealed in the back of his van. Following the fuel stop, Jamie embarked on a journey spanning 60 miles, eventually arriving at a movie theater. Remarkably, he callously abandoned George's remains in the van parked within the theater's lot, before proceeding inside to indulge in a film screening. In a disturbing turn of events, Jamie's actions at the movie theater represented his twisted attempt to fulfill his desire to take Georgia out on a date, albeit in a macabre and horrifying manner. However, law enforcement lost track of Jamie following his departure from the theater, prompting authorities to issue a public appeal for information regarding his whereabouts. Fortunately, this appeal yielded results, with individuals coming forward to report sightings of Jamie's van in the vicinity of the New York-Georgia Mountain Pass near Exum. This area, abundant with dense woodland and treacherously muddy terrain, served as the backdrop for Jamie's attempt to evade capture. Recollections of Jamie and his van were vivid among locals, particularly due to an incident where his vehicle became mired in mud. Good Samaritans had intervened to help extricate it from the muck. Acting on this crucial tip, law enforcement ventured into the wooded area where Jamie had been spotted. Tragically, it was in this secluded setting that they made the grim discovery of George's unclothed body. Following the recovery, George's remains were transported back to Shropshire. A subsequent post-mortem examination revealed that Georgia had succumbed to asphyxiation, likely resulting from pressure applied to her neck by a ligature. Additionally, forensic analysis uncovered bruising on her back, indicative of Jamie having forcefully pressed her downward using his knee, exacerbating her helplessness and suffering. Despite steadfastly maintaining his innocence and denying any involvement in her murder, Jamie's stance took a dramatic shift on the inaugural day of the trial in December 2013. Without warning, he opted to rise and plead guilty to all charges leveled against him. In a poignant moment, George's father addressed the court, articulating the enduring anguish he and his wife bore from the haunting image of their daughter's lifeless body, lying in the solemn confines of the hospital's chapel of rest, an indelible scar etched upon their souls for eternity. Throughout the trial, revelations surfaced regarding Jamie's prior brushes with the law. In 2008, he had attracted police attention, receiving what the judge deemed a final warning, following an unsettling incident involving the confinement of another 1-year-old girl in his residence, a harrowing precursor to the tragedy that befell Georgia in 2011. He found himself under scrutiny once more, after an incident where he recklessly reversed his car into that of a girl who rebuffed his romantic advances. Although the case was eventually closed, the judge, Mr. Justice Wilkie, did not mince words, labeling Jamie a sexual deviant and expressing grave concerns about his potential to escalate and become a dangerous serial offender. Consequently, Jamie was handed a whole life term, a sentence reserved for the most heinous of crimes, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars without the possibility of parole. This marked Jamie as the 46th individual to receive such a sentence, setting a grim record as the youngest in history to be condemned to a whole life term. Justice Will's remarks during sentencing painted a chilling portrait of the events, underscoring the profound anguish inflicted upon Georgia. He emphasized the torturous nature of her ordeal, highlighting Jamie's twisted fixation with violent and sadistic pornography, culminating in a grotesque display of power over his victim as she faced a harrowing demise. Jamie Reynolds bowed his head in shame as Georgia's grief-stricken parents and sister listened to the harrowing details of her tragic demise and the horrors she endured at his hands. The courtroom was filled with unbearable tension as the jury was confronted with the gruesome images depicting Georgia's final moments, prompting her devastated family to flee in anguish. In 2014, Reynolds sought to appeal his whole life sentence, but was met with defeat. The following year, a serious case review castigated police officers, children's services personnel, and mental health professionals for their handling of Reynolds before the murder. The review highlighted systemic failures in interagency collaboration when Reynolds had previously come to law enforcement's attention 5 years earlier, following an incident where he attempted to strangle another girl at his residence. Georgia's parents expressed profound sorrow upon reading the report, lamenting the missed opportunities to intervene and prevent their daughter's tragic fate, stating, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making." Georgia's death could have been prevented. Outside the courtroom, Mr. Williams expressed the family's profound grief, stating, "There is no sentence that we can ever say we're satisfied with, because it'll never bring Georgia back. She's dead, she's gone physically, and lives in our hearts." He emphasized the irreparable loss they experienced and lamented that regardless of the length of Reynolds' prison term, he still retained the one precious gift he had denied their daughter: life. Jamie Reynolds continues to serve his sentence in prison to this day. Georgia's mother, Lynette, has since penned their journey of grief in her book, Our Georgia, which delves into the family's profound sense of betrayal stemming from the failures that allowed Reynolds, with his disturbing fixation on snuff movies, to roam free and ultimately commit murder. Described as a powerful and moving memoir, the book serves as both a tribute to Georgia's memory and a poignant exploration of the aftermath of her tragic death. Georgia's tragic passing inflicted irreparable wounds upon those who cherished her, leaving behind an unfathomable void. Her absence stands as a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of treasuring each precious moment with our loved ones. In the wake of her loss, the community united in solidarity, offering unwavering support to Georgia's grieving family and friends, providing a source of solace during their darkest days. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Neha Verma. There are many instances that raise concerns about the safety of women, even in the present day. In June 2011, a similar event occurred in the lovely city of India. 3 women were discovered murdered in their residence, and it took the authorities several days to pinpoint the perpetrators. The query persists: who was responsible for this triple homicide, and what drove them to kill these 3 women? Let's delve deeper into the Deshpande family murders case. In 2011, Megha Deshpande, 42 years old, resided in the upscale area of Srinagar in the city of Indore with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini. It is noteworthy that Indore has repeatedly been ranked as the cleanest city in India. Srinagar is known for its affluent residents, indicating the Deshpande family's strong financial status. Megha Deshpande worked in a multi-level marketing (MLM) company for a considerable period. MLM, also known as network marketing, direct selling, operates by connecting individuals to the company through a network. This system allows for continuous profit generation for the company owner as more people join the network. Before residing in Indore, Mega lived in the city of Eugene with her husband and the rest of the family, which is about 35 miles away from Indore. However, a few months ago, Mega shifted her home with her daughter and mother. Mega's husband, Nanjay, was a bank manager, so he had to stay in Eugene. Nanjay was a bank manager, and Mega was a senior employee at an MLM company, so they had no financial worries. Mega's family also had a strong relationship with their neighbors, and all the residents in this community were sensible. So far, there had been no crimes that could cause fear among the people. But something happened in this area on June 13, 2011, which shook the entire city of Indore. During that time, nobody had left Mega's house until noon, and no one's voice was heard. However, suddenly, one of Mega Deshpande's neighbors walked by her house and noticed something very unusual. There were footprints with blood stains around Mega's house. This sight alarmed her, prompting her to quickly call the authorities to investigate Mega's house. After that, the neighbor also knocked on the door of the house several times, but there was no response from inside. Then, they tried to look up inside the house through a window, but upon seeing what was inside, he screamed loudly because he saw 3 women lying on the ground in the house, with blood all around their bodies. After this, in a state of panic, the neighbor quickly informed the police about it. For the police, this case was completely different because such an incident had never happened in the Srinagar area. Now gradually, many people of this society came to know about this incident, and by the time the police reached the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside the Deshpande family's house. Then, the police entered the house and were surprised to see the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered by the criminals. They seized the crime scene and began their investigation, discovering 2 bullet shells inside the house. A police officer observed that Mega had been fatally shot in the head, but they could not locate the second bullet, despite thoroughly searching every corner of the house. After this, the police called in the forensic team to start collecting evidence from the crime scene, and then the dead bodies of these 3 women were sent for post-mortem. By this time, not only Srinagar, but the entire city of Indore was shocked with this news. A few hours later, the post-mortem report is presented to the police, revealing that the murders of 21-year-old Asleha and her 70-year-old grandmother Rohini were due to excessive bleeding with multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report also makes it clear that only Mega Deshpande was shot to death. But now, the biggest question before the police was if they have found 2 bullet shells, then on whom was the second shot fired? On the other hand, Mega's husband and the general public started demanding a quick solution to the case so the culprits could be punished. The police felt the increasing pressure from the public and a sense of urgency to solve the case quickly. Consequently, several teams were deployed by the police to investigate. One team examined the call detail records of the victims, while another team rechecked the forensic evidence. At first, the police found out that at the crime scene, there was blood of an additional person besides Mega, Ashlesha, and Rohini, and the police knew it was likely a man. A case of robbery and murder was filed, as it appeared that theft had taken place at the Deshpande family's residence. Later, investigations revealed that there were multiple calls made to Mega's phone from a specific number, and Mega had lengthy conversations with this number. Now the police extracted complete information about this number, from where it was revealed to the police that this number belonged to a girl named Neha Verma. Now the police had also started tracking the location of the girl, so that they could talk to her regarding this case, which might provide them with some leads. On the other hand, the police now also had a sample of that blood which was separate from Mega, Ashlesha, and Rohini at the crime scene. Then one day, suddenly the police find out that Neha is near an ATM in that area. After that, a team of police reached there and brought Neha to the police station to talk to her. Now Neha was told about the entire scene, which left Neha completely astonished. After that, Neha explained how she met Mega. Megha and Neha met for the first time in a shopping mall. Neha accidentally bumped into Megha while rushing through the mall. Megha was holding some items in her hand, which fell down due to the collision. Neha then apologized and helped Megha pick up the fallen items. During this time, there was a lot of conversation between them, so much so that Neha herself went to drop Megha to the car, and from here onwards, their friendship started. Neha discovered that Megha works at a company involved in multi-level marketing, MLM. They exchanged phone numbers the same day and started talking occasionally. Neha was curious about the MLM business model, so she would discuss it with Megha. However, the police became suspicious of Neha's story because her words and body language didn't align. As a result, they questioned Neha extensively. Neha tried to conceal her lie briefly, but she couldn't withstand the police interrogation for long. Eventually, she confessed a story that shocked even the police. Neha, a 23-year-old, was beautiful and cheerful. Although she was a beautician, her financial situation wasn't good enough for her to fulfill her dreams. Neha's father was an ordinary van driver, which meant their financial condition wasn't great enough for Neha to pursue her dreams. It was during this time that Neha met a guy named Rahul Chaudhary. They developed a good friendship, which eventually turned into love. Rahul, at 24, was handsome, but his financial situation was the same as Neha's. Despite this, they loved each other deeply and wanted to marry, so they were searching for a way to become rich overnight and live their lives comfortably. One day, Neha met Megha. Megha had a fondness for wearing expensive jewelry, so whenever she went out, she adorned herself with her jewels. The day Megha met Neha for the first time, she was decked out in gold jewelry, which indicated to Neha that Megha was very wealthy, sparking the idea in Neha's mind to get close to Megha Deshpande and befriend her. Subsequently, Neha deliberately bumped into Megha to strike up a conversation, and thus their interactions began. Now, gradually, due to talking through a call, the thought of robbing Megha came into Neha's mind. After this, Neha included her boyfriend Rahul in her plan. She told Rahul that she has conversations with a woman who is very wealthy, and the added advantage is that there are no men in her house, so it will be easy to rob her. Hearing this idea, Rahul also becomes happy because by doing this, both of their financial situations would improve. And then they could live comfortably after getting married. From that day on, Rahul began to plan the murders of these three women. He believed that if he successfully killed them without anyone finding out, there would be no one to report them. With a complete plan in place, Rahul only needed a gun to carry out the deed. His friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, provided him with one, as he also had a gun. With the means to execute his plan, Rahul started searching for the right day to make his move against Megha and her family. On June 13, 2011, Neha contacted Megha to join her MLM scheme. Megha was pleased to have Neha on board. Unbeknownst to Megha, this day would bring unforeseen tragedy. Neha arrived at Megha's house early the next morning. Megha asked Neha to fill out a form for the company, but Neha was unsure about the required information. She requested help from her friend and Megha approved. Neha then contacted her boyfriend, Rahul. Now, according to the plan, Rahul and Manoj were waiting for Neha's call, and then shortly after that, Rahul and Manoj went to Megha's house. But as soon as Rahul entered the house, he showed Megha a gun, and then, a few seconds later, he shot Megha, causing her to die on the spot. The sound of the gunshot didn't go out of their house, because Rahul had shot very close, but the sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini's ears, causing both of them to run into the lobby. After that, first Rahul and Manoj frightened Ashlesha and Rohini and asked for her ATM card and PIN to save their lives. In order to save her life, Ashlesha quickly gave her ATM card and handed it to Rahul. She felt that now these people would leave. But now, because Ashlesha and her grandmother had seen Neha, Rahul, and Manoj's faces, so now these three were afraid that after they leave, these two might inform the police. So Rahul first tried to shoot Ashlesha, but in haste, this bullet hit Rahul's own foot. Afterwards, Manoj brutally murdered Ashlesha and elderly Rohini with a knife. Afterwards, these three criminals stole 1,000 Indian rupees, valuable jewelry worth up to $500,000 Indian rupees, and Ash's ATM card before leaving the house. Surprisingly, it was the same ATM card Neha was planning to withdraw money from, but she was later caught by the police. Rahul was captured after going to a police station with a fake first information report, and then being hospitalized locally due to a gunshot wound in his foot. Nonetheless, when the police compared Rahul's blood sample taken from the crime scene with his own, it was a match. The police quickly solved this case and captured the criminals, resulting in much praise for their city's police force. Subsequently, this case remained in court for a long time, but eventually, in December 2013, the district court sentenced these three criminals to death by hanging. These killers had wiped out the entire Deshpande family line by murdering women from 3 different generations. Moreover, the police found bloodied clothes, knives, and jewelry in possession of these criminals. Neha Verma is currently incarcerated in the central jail, where she is teaching a beauty parlor course to other female inmates. It should also be noted that this was the first time the district court had pronounced capital punishment for a woman. Megha's husband, Nanai Deshpande, expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and said he had full confidence in the judiciary, and the police did a great job. The aspiration to become rich overnight turned an ordinary girl and boy into criminals. If these criminals had fled to another country after killing and stealing money, they might never have been caught. However, if Megha hadn't worn her valuable jewelry to the mall that day and hadn't trusted a random person, perhaps her family would still be alive today. One lesson to be learned from this is that we shouldn't develop such strong friendships with any stranger in just a few days, that we start inviting them home.
In the early hours of July 7, 1985, 54-year-old Jane Anchor Hilton was found beaten and stabbed to death. She was discovered in a bedroom at her employer's house, a house she moved into only the previous day, seeking refuge from a troubled marriage. Jane was discovered by 2 fellow housemates and her own daughter, Autumn. The murder made no sense, and the case dragged for 14 years, until 2 new detectives reopened the cold case in 1999. A misquote in an article led investigators to point the finger at Ricky Davis. Davis was eventually tried for the crime and convicted, all the while proclaiming his innocence. Determined not to give up, he sought help from the same justice system that put him behind bars. 15 years later, Davis was exonerated and the real killer found thanks to genetic genealogy testing and the determination of a group called the Innocence Project, who were determined to find the truth. Jane was a familiar face around El Dorado Hills, California. She was a columnist for Foothill Times. She often covered social events in and around town for the paper. Jane had 6 children whom she loved and often wrote poetry to help inspire them daily. She'd been working toward getting her real estate license and was married to Archie Hilton in 1984. However, by July 1985, their marriage started to fall apart. It was then she asked her employer, Wilma Klein, for assistance. Klein owned a fairly large home in El Dorado Hills. With her lived her daughter, Maureen Klein, and her boyfriend. Wilma's grandson, Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl, also occupied a room at the house. On July 6, 1985, Wilma welcomed Jane and her youngest daughter, 13-year-old Autumn Anchor, into her home. By all accounts, it was a full house. The first night of her new life would prove to be the night her life ended. At 3:30 a.m., Ricky Davis, then 20, and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Connie Dahl, returned from a party to find Autumn lingering about outside. She told them she was out late and afraid her mother was going to be angry. All 3 made their way into the house. There was blood in the hallway. It was silent as they reached the first room, belonging to Maureen, Ricky's mother. On the bed was the bloody body of Jane Hilton. She was not breathing. Maureen and her boyfriend had gone on a camping trip and were not home at the time. Ricky and Connie called 911. Paramedics and police arrived, but Jane was pronounced dead at the scene. She had suffered 29 stab wounds, was beaten and bitten on her shoulder. It was a senseless murder, and investigators began to interview those closest to Jane. Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, was interviewed and provided detectives with a solid alibi and DNA. Archie had been the logical choice as he and Jane had been going through a rough patch. He, however, said that the marriage was not over and that there was no trouble between them. He was cleared and all leaves went cold. Ricky Davis and Connie Dahl both told investigators they arrived home in the early morning hours and found Autumn waiting outside. When they entered the house, they found the hallway carpet bloody. The blood trail led them to the master bedroom where they found Jane lying dead on the bloodied mattress. They speculated that an intruder may have been responsible for the murder. For 14 years, the case remained unsolved. The cold case reopened in 1999. El Dorado County Sheriff's detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald were tasked with the investigation. After poring over paperwork, they zoomed in on a news article. Connie Dahl, former girlfriend of Ricky Davis and housemate of Jane Hilton, had given an interview to a reporter. She was quoted saying Hilton's body was lying in bed like someone placed her there in the position she would normally sleep in. This statement seemed to contradict a muffled audio recording of a statement that Davis had previously made. Detective Fitzgerald falsely thought he heard him say the body was found on the floor. Dahl was, at the time, serving a jail sentence in Oregon on unrelated charges. Detectives brought her in for an interview and began a 3-hour-long interrogation. Initially, Dahl stuck to her original story. Over the next 18 months, though, she would be interrogated 4 times. Detectives were found to have used techniques known to increase the chances of a false confession. Dahl was systematically forced into incriminating Davis and Jane's daughter Autumn in the murder. Dahl was threatened with a charge of murder. If she cooperated, though, she would be given a lenient sentence of manslaughter and serve only a year. Detective Strasser and Fitzgerald told Dahl that DNA evidence was going to be used to trace the suspect. In truth, no DNA evidence was brought into the case during that period. In truth, testing had not been done on the DNA recovered from the scene. By showing a crime scene photos and using facts from the crime, such as the bike mark on Jane's shoulder, investigators sped Dahl the information they wanted to hear. Over the course of the 4 interviews, Dahl was starting to break. She began remembering facts from the crime. This in turn allowed her to fabricate and create an entirely different account of events from the night of the murder. In one interview, Dahl said that Autumn was present during the murder of Jane and was sprayed with blood. In another, she confessed that she was probably the person that bit Jane on the shoulder. Dahl would say that the murder began with an argument between Davis and Jane. She alleged that Davis wanted Autumn to join them at a party. When Jane refused, Davis erupted in a fit of anger, leading to the death of Jane. Her story kept changing to fit the facts being fed. However, she couldn't remember the weapon used for the murder or where it was eventually hidden. Dahl had implicated her ex-boyfriend Davis in the murder of Jane Hilton. He was now the prime suspect. Ricky Davis and Autumn Anker were also interviewed following the confession of Connie Dahl. Both Davis and Anker stuck to their original accounts of the crime. Detectives again lied to Davis, telling him that Anker had also implicated him in the murder. Anker told detectives she had no reason to protect Davis when they threatened her with culpability regarding the murder. Despite their interrogation techniques, detectives could not sway Davis or Anker to change their stories. They therefore used the confession of Dahl to arrest Davis. Dahl was offered a plea bargain to testify against Davis at his trial. Davis's first trial was declared a mistrial by jurors. His second, in 2005, would eventually convict him. Dahl took the stand and testified against Davis. She told the court of how she struggled with Jane and she herself accidentally bit the victim on the shoulder. She went on to say that she went outside as Davis continued the bloody assault on Hilton. Dull said she could hear screaming, pleading, and gurgling as Davis continued the brutal attack. Based entirely on the testimony of Dull's account of events, Davis was sentenced to 16 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Jane Hilton. Dull received a lesser charge of manslaughter and received a year-long sentence at the county jail. Dull, though, would eventually die from a drug overdose in 2014. Meanwhile, Davis was not going down without a fight. He maintained his innocence and in 2006 made contact with the Northern California Innocence Project. He asked if they could help him prove that he was wrongly convicted. The NCIP was founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rodolphe and Linda Starr. The project began after legislation offered convicted inmates to seek DNA testing to prove their innocence. It's a non-profit clinical program of Santa Clara University's School of Law. After Davis made contact with the NCIP in 2006, his case was put through a thorough re-examination. Cooperation between the NCIP and the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office allowed for the DNA recovered from the crime scene to be retested post-conviction. Evidence from the crime scene included Hilton's nightgown and biological material found under her fingernails. The results revealed an unknown male DNA profile. DNA from Hilton's fingernails and nightgown were both found to be from the same source. Test results eliminated Davis, Dull, and Anchor. This proved Dull's testimony was contradictory to the physical evidence and therefore had to have been fabricated. The DNA also proved Archie Hilton innocent. Unfortunately, he had passed away by the time results were released. The DNA profile file was entered into the FBI Combined Index DNA system, CODIS, but no matches were found. Although the evidence seemed to prove Davis's consistent claim of innocence correct, there were some hurdles that still needed to be jumped. The NCIP successfully argued that had the DNA results been presented to the jury during Davis's trial, the outcome would be different. However, until January 2017, the California standard required that new evidence point unerringly to innocence. It was considered an almost unattainable standard. In 2015, a false confession expert, Richard Leo, reviewed transcripts of Dull's interrogations. Leo concluded that the methods used by detectives during the interrogation of Dull were designed to pressure and persuade Dull to adopt an account that matched the detectives' pre-existing beliefs about how and why the murder of Jane Hilton occurred. In 2016, though, the NCIP co-sponsored Senate Bill 1134. This bill allowed wrongfully convicted inmates, like Davis, to prove that new evidence would likely have been compelling to a jury. NCIP attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a petition for a new trial based on the new DNA evidence testing. Championed by former California State Senator Martha Lino, the bill was passed in January 2017, putting California's standard in line with about 43 other states. In 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malikian vacated Davis's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. Initially set to start in fall of 2019, however, the judge announced the trial would take place in April 2020, citing the defense attorney's health as the catalyst for change in date. However, the fate of the trial was about to change once again. Advancements in DNA testing led to Davis becoming the first convicted person in California and the second in the United States to be exonerated for a crime. Genetic genealogy is a fairly new DNA testing concept. It involves taking DNA evidence from a crime scene and sending them to genetic companies. These companies then search family tree databases to find a potential match. In February 2020, DNA evidence matched to a man considered an unlikely suspect. El Dorado County Attorney Vern Pearson announced in February 2020 that a new suspect had been identified as the man linked to the DNA evidence found on Jane Hilton's body. Following the arrest, many people spoke to the media about the man they knew as Michael Green. Green was a longtime resident of Roseville, California. He graduated from Oakmount High School in 1986. He was described as an easygoing, kind person, even-tempered, and even super chill. One classmate who wanted to remain anonymous could not understand why Green would go to El Dorado Hills and brutally murder a woman. According to reports, Green was 17 years old at the time of Hilton's murder. On the night of July 6, 1985, the victim's daughter, Autumn, met Green and two of his friends, Calvin and Stephen. They hung out together at the park when Autumn decided to go home and have a shower before returning. Allegedly, Autumn told her mother she was going to another friend's house for the evening. Instead, she returned to the park to join the boys. What happened next is pure speculation. Investigators believe that during this time, Green broke into the house and was confronted by Jane. In a struggle to get away, Green may have attacked her in a frenzy. Following the attack, Jane's body was discovered by Davis, Dahl, and Otto when they returned home. Green had no criminal convictions either before or after the murder. It seems he'd led a normal life until DNA linked him to the gruesome crime. The other two boys who were with Green were tracked down shortly after his arrest. Calvin, unfortunately, had died some time ago. Stephen, however, was found and interviewed the day after the arrest. He was being treated as a witness and not a participant. Green was arrested on February 11, 2020. Since Green was a teenager at the time of the murder, he made his first appearance at the juvenile court on February 19, 2020. District Attorney Vern Pearson said that, procedurally, the court has to go through some steps on the juvenile side of it. Following this, Green was granted a transfer so that he could be tried as an adult. He waited 2.5 years before he would be tried in court. Green pleaded no contest on July 29, 2022. This plea means Green gave up his right to a jury trial. A jury trial meant he was to face a charge of first-degree murder. He also gave up his chance to challenge the plea or the consequences of his decision. His sentencing date was set for September 27, 2022, to be presided over by Judge Suzanne Kingsbury. At sentencing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor in psychological science education, was called in on educational capacity to explain to the court the development of an adolescent. Kaufman's research explained the varying development needs of adolescents with regard to emotional and cognitive development. The late adolescent stage allowed an individual to understand right from wrong, yet at the same time, they're also functioning under diminished capacity for impulse control. The defense called several witnesses from Green's childhood, some who even maintained relationships with him into adulthood. Each witness was asked if their opinion had changed of him since the knowledge of his confession. All witnesses agreed they'd been shocked to discover that he was responsible for the murder of Hilton. Individuals who knew him in varying capacities described him as jovial, popular, funny, and loving. These words were used to describe him before and after the murder. Green's ex-wife, Karen Green, said, "There's just not a bad bone in Mike." After witness statements were given, each of Jane Hilton's children presented their victim impact statements. They all described the unforgivable loss that Green inflicted upon their family. The why it happened and how different my life could have been will haunt me forever, said Heather Purvis McConnell, one of Jane's daughters. Argith Brandon, Hilton's fourth child, said, "I loved my mother, and I assume Michael loves his mother too. I want to know what he would feel or what he would say to the person who stabbed your mother 29 times. What would you do if you received an early morning call to tell you your mother is dead?" The court listened to her description of the feeling of gathering her mother's belongings from the house in which she was killed. Ardith finished with a powerful declaration. "We will always have something in common, regretting the stupid decision you made 37 years ago." Hilton's son Ian echoed his sister's sentiments. He went on to explain the uncertainty the family faced and the recurring nightmares they suffered, especially after the crooked finger of blame was pointed at his own sister, Autumn. He broke down in tears as he ended with an almost inaudible remark. "All the words we say will never bring my mother back." Autumn was the last to speak. Her statement showed true agony as she recounted the cloud of suspicions she'd lived under for the last 2 decades. Recounting the day, two crew-cut thick mustache detectives came into her house telling her they found the people responsible for her mother's death. She was then repeatedly accused of biting her mother and helping move her body from the floor to the bed. Autumn went on to say that if she hadn't said the word lawyer at that point, she did not know how much further the intimidation tactics of the investigators could have gone. Afterwards, Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement on behalf of the family. In the statement, he asked Green what made him end Jane's life in such a brutal manner. "You beat her. She had numerous wounds around her head and face. By your own words, you kicked her jaw. You bit her on the shoulder. Why was that?" Linden continued to read the statement that expressed how Green didn't just murder Jane, he destroyed numerous lives in the process. Linden then asked Green if he'd given any thought about Jane and who she was. He pointed out her achievements and the love she had for each of her children. In closing arguments, Margaret Husher, Green's defense attorney, stressed the idea that he was unable to stop himself. She emphasized that he did not know what he was doing was wrong, as he was an adolescent at the time. This argument was based on the testimony of expert witness Dr. Kaufman. She asked that the court show mercy as she read off the multiple penal codes and rules of the court. Judge Kingsbury interjected by saying, "The court is not going to put him on probation," effectively ending any further comment from the defense. In response, Linden thanked the court and said the application for probation was offensive. He said, "It was a smack to this family who had endured this predicance." Linden stated that he already got away with murder for 37 years. Placing him on probation allowed him to get away with more. Judge Kingsbury said she had heard a multitude of arguments about murder cases surrounding adolescent development. She remarked that after her 26 years on the bench, Jane Hilton's murder was by far the most brutal. Before passing her sentence, Kingsbury asked the family for their forgiveness for the trauma they had suffered, although she was not originally assigned the case. She also hoped they would heal from the pain, as it would have been their mother's wish. Kingsbury then encouraged Green to use all resources at his disposal in the California Department of Rehabilitation. "You're the key to the questions these people have. Doing that could ultimately help you with your outcome as it relates to parole," said Kingsbury. In closing, Kingsbury pointed out that she had heard from his friends that there's a great side to him and that he has much to offer. She also said he was young enough to be released and live a productive life. Green was sentenced to 15 years to life and remanded to the El Dorado County Jail. He will then be transferred to the California Department of Rehabilitation. Restitution will be decided after further consideration by the court. Davis was released on February 13, 2020, and planned to celebrate over pizza with his family. His lawyer, Melissa O'Connell, said he will be entitled to more than $750,000 in state compensation for the wrongful conviction. Although the amount was high enough for him to re-enter society and start afresh, O'Connell said it could not make up for the years of freedom that he lost. Davis went on to sue the state for damages covering the period from May 21, 2002 to February 13, 2020 for a whopping $18 million. The lawsuit names El Dorado County as well as former detectives Richard Strasser, Rick Fitzgerald, Bill Wilson, who's deceased and being sued through his estate, and Larry Hennig. Sheriff's Office pathologist Dr. Robert Anthony has also been included in the complaint. A Village Life newspaper reported that Davis was homeless after being released. The lawsuit is still pending as of 2022. In September 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2644. This bill would, commencing January 1, 2024, prohibit law enforcement officers from employing threats, physical harm, deception, or psychological manipulative interrogation tactics, as specified during a custodial interrogation of a person 17 years of age or younger. The bill faced opposition, but District Attorney Van Pearson is urging all law enforcement to stop using intimidation tactics. Pearson stated that 10 years ago, he would have viewed the methods used to get a confession differently. However, after seeing the true impact it can have, he believed there is room for change. This also comes after research points to deceptive tactics being used for years by law enforcement that will presume guilt and focus on getting a confession rather than getting the full story. The district attorney is implementing this new policy in his office and is urging other district attorneys to do the same. El Dorado County DA's office will now reject any case where the primary evidence is a confession obtained using threats, lies, or psychological manipulation interrogation tactics. These measures are to ensure that no one is ever again convicted based on a coerced false confession like the case of Ricky Davis. Pearson personally apologized to all involved in the miscarriage of justice caused by the tactics used by Ben investigators into the brutal 1985 murder of Jane Hilton. After 37 years, the right man is finally facing justice. Yet the lives of so many were left broken by mistakes and false accusations. For Jane Hilton's family, hopefully they can now pick up the pieces after being divided over the innocence of their own sister, Autumn. Ricky Davis can never regain the liberty he lost. And Michael Green destroyed not only the lives of the victim's family and friends, but the lives that he touched in the years before and after the murder. What are your thoughts on today's case? Did Michael Green deserve the sentence he received? Does his clean record, minus the murder, make him innocent of intentional murder? How could he let an innocent man take the blame for his actions? Can Ricky Davis ever get his life back on track even when he does receive compensation? And why is it taking so long? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, take care.